the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Call down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio! All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
Up the airy mountain, down the rushing glen, wanna go hunting, the fear of little men. You see, nobody ever goes in. Nobody ever comes out.
We know where you are at all times. That's our business.
All right, welcome to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where you don't need to expect us. We're already here. And now it is time for Firing Lines with Douglas Dietrich. So call in 347-688-2902. That is 347-688-2902 and discuss what you would like to discuss with Mr. Douglas Dietrich. Freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, weaponized talk radio.
Douglas isn't around right now, and please don't call that number because you're listening to Celebrate Truth Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson. My co-host, Pastor Nate Wolfe, is not with us tonight. He's actually speaking at a conference this weekend, and he'll be back next week. But I have got an awesome show lined up. I got two amazing guests tonight. I've got Mr. Johnny Rocket and Chris Bailey. These guys know music, so if you've come here and you want to know about Christian music, you come to the right place. We're going to get into trivia. We're going to get into all sorts of dialogue and all sorts of discussions around Christian music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right up to present day. It's going to be a fantastic show. First, I want to introduce a brand new guest on Celebrate Truth Radio. It's been a long time, long overdue. He actually had me on his show 2 years ago talking about Scientism Exposed and all sorts of things. You probably remember that show, Johnny, but it was an amazing time. It's so awesome to have him on. He's my best man. He was my best man at the wedding. And he's been in Christian radio for 17 years. That's right, 17 years. It's a long time. He knows it. He's going to be up against Chris Bailey, which also has been into Christian music. I think he has close to 4,000 or 5,000 CDs in his collection. He'll talk more about that in a few. But anyways, first I want to introduce Johnny Rocket. Johnny, thanks for coming on to Celebrate Truth Radio.
Man, I am so pumped that we are able to hang out, and this finally is happening, Robbie.
Finally, it's unbelievable. Like I said, I was on your show, and maybe you want to plug your show just for people that aren't aware of kind of what you do. Obviously, if they're not aware, maybe you can explain a little bit about what you do, but then also, talking about your podcast as well.
Sure. I do a morning show in Edmonton for 105.9 Shine FM, and I have a side project that's called the Why Me Project, where in the hills and valleys of life, you ask God that question, why me? Why am I put into this situation? And it really just brings about encouragement. So we talk to artists and athletes and really anybody who has a story. And we had a chance to have you on a couple of years ago, as you had mentioned. And we're almost 3 years coming up in April.
Wow. So how many podcasts have you done now?
I think we're on 145.
Wow.
And spoiler alert, in 2 weeks from now, we're going to have John Rubin on as we're going to talk a little music and everything else. So that'll be for episode 147.
I think you need to get Phil on from the VeggieTales. VeggieTales has actually spanned so many different generations. I remember actually in college and career, we actually used to watch VeggieTales. It was the funniest thing. It was like, here's a bunch of college and career people. We're all getting together. We're watching VeggieTales. But you've had so many different awesome guests on, throughout the years. I'm sure you've got lots of people, in store for 2020.
Well, obviously you're not listening to every single episode because we have had Phil on.
Have you had Phil?
On the podcast.
Oh, okay. I was just watching VeggieTales tonight actually with the kids, so it's just like, oh my goodness. You did have Phil on. That's right. I don't listen to every podcast. You have 145.
It's all good, man.
I'm going to ask you a question.
I'm going
to put you in the hot seat right now. How many Celebrate Truth radio shows have you listened to?
Oh man, so many.
You know what's sad about that? And
What?
This is what the sad thing is. You probably have listened to an entire of 0 shows. But on the flip side, you've actually seen more of my Celebrate Truth videos than many people that are listening right now.
That's fair. What I lack in one, I make up in the other.
Yeah, it works out that way. Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on. Our other guests tonight, we've been on the show many times talking about all sorts of different topics, and now you're going to see a different side or hear a different side of where things are going tonight with our show. But this is Chris Bailey. He's the organizer, him and his wife, of Take on the World conferences. I've had the privilege of speaking at the last 2. He's working on Take on the World 2020 for this August. It's unfortunate that I will not be able to be there, but I have a baby on the way, so I have a good excuse. But anyways, welcome to the show, Chris. It's great to have you on.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Nice to be here again. I'm sort of filling in, I guess, for Nate Wolfe. So
that's right. He's at the Isaiah. What is it again?
Isaiah 46:10. Yeah. So he's doing. I've already watched one of the presentations. That he knocked it out of the park. So
yeah. I'm sure he would. He's got a great way of doing his presentations. They just come out in that way that just resonate with so many different people, depending on where the levels are. You know what I mean?
Yep. Totally.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about you. Not so much, obviously being, the founder and organizer of Take on the World conferences and all the stuff you do at Take on the World TV on YouTube, all the various shows. I think a lot of people that are listening would know maybe, of that. But maybe you can explain a little bit. How did you get so involved in Christian music, and what does it mean to be so involved?
I will condense it because I could definitely go
in 5 minutes or less. Yeah, 5 minutes or less.
Less than, I'll try to give it less than that. I'll tell you. I grew up in a Christian home. I was around, just the Christian lifestyle, that bubble. But I was never really into the Christian music, other than. We sung hymns in church, it was that typical normal stuff. But as I got older, none of my friends were into, I wasn't blessed to have like a youth group. So I was never really exposed to much Christian music. I mean, I remember seeing like DC Talk early on, but, I went down the path of, listening to lots of secular music and, that just led me down that path of just lots of wrong decisions internally. Nothing that I did externally. So even though I was listening to things that were talking about sex, drugs, and swearing, even at an early age, it's not like I never acted on that because I didn't do any of those things at all. I never drank and never smoked. Never did drugs, married my wife as virgin, right? So, all of those things that I did, it was all that internalizing that just eventually, we know garbage in, garbage out. And those things did start to play an effect of, my attitudes and the lack of spiritual growth. I didn't have a desire to read the word. I wasn't doing any of the bad stuff. So that's how I justified it. And so, for all parents, for all, all young people, listening to some of the worst things and being a believer and justifying that, I used to make mixtapes for the guys I worked with at UPS, and I remember making this mixtape for someone, and they handed me this album. It was called Mars Ill. And he said, "Hey man, you gotta check this out. These they're like, hey, this guy might be Jewish or something. He like talks all about God, like you talk about." And I didn't even know who this group was, and I was like dumbfounded, and I felt like embarrassed, and that started down that path, and then we became youth leaders, and we're talking to the kids, and they're talking about the music they like, and I'm going, that's the same music I listen to. And I'm going to be setting up to be a youth leader. I immediately cut that out of my life. It was such a vice. And then, funny enough, I went to a Christian bookstore, started picking out CDs. I picked out, all the, some of the early, rock, hip hop stuff. And there sat the album Mars Ill Raw Material. And I'm going, I already had that in my possession. And I had no clue. The guy told me it might have been Jewish or something. Here it is in the Christian bookstore. And I'm going, wow, isn't that funny? So, long story, that's how I got involved. So I was really late to the game, when that, because that's,
so what year would this be?
We're talking like 2000, 2001, okay. Is really the height of when I like fully accepted and came in, and then I became a nerd, and all my I became, so I made up for lost time, but so that's what I've been so passionate about, because obviously music, the things we listen to, things we put in our minds, they have a great effect. I'm not sure back
then, like how much were CDs in America back then in like 2001? Because I know, at the heyday, and Johnny's going to remember this in Canada, but CDs were $24.99. Do you remember that, Johnny?
Yep.
$24.99.
And you could get a double CD too. Don't forget that you could get the double CD, which was either $28, or you could also get it for $34.99.
Correct. Yeah, and I bought so many CDs when they were $24.99.
Yep.
4 CDs were $100.
Yep.
Yeah. So, anyways, Chris, how much were they? Like, what was the most expensive value you remember in America for CDs?
Yeah.
Did you miss that?
Well, probably right around 2000. CDs were starting to come down in price here, so yes. On new releases they might be $9.99. Then everyday price might be $13.99. But that was the range, and sometimes you might be able to pick up stuff, on discount clearance. We had a killer, Christian bookstore who ran like 30 to 40% off Friday nights at 11 o'clock at night. So you would come in. It was on the east side of town, so it was not in the greatest neighborhood, but I'd go down there, and they had a used section. So I used to get so much old. That's how I started my collection, with the used stuff that they sold for $1 or $2.
Sure.
And, come to find out, it was bands like Bride and, some of these really pricey albums, I was able to pick them up for super inexpensive and start that collection. So I'd get the new stuff that just came out for $10 with with a 30%, 40% discount, and so I was racking it up, and I was newly married, so funds, I could go in and get a huge stack of CDs, for $100, $120, and Liz, my wife, would go, okay, you can do that once a month. That's it. And so, So
well, we got three spectrums here. Then we got you coming in a little late in the game. I came in around 91, 92, and I went in head first. I used to go to the bookstore, and I'd walk out with like 8 to 10 CDs a time, and that was like each week. Like I went so crazy, it wasn't funny. But then let's get to Johnny. Johnny, when did you actually remember you really going hardcore into music? Obviously, you were brought up as a Christian, and you probably listened to Christian music here and there, but maybe tell your story for people that aren't aware.
Well, it was funny for me because I didn't start going to church until I was a teen, but you listen to like you're talking about like a CD changer. My CD changer would be the dichotomy of hardcore hip hop and then a Newsboys CD. And so I had as many Christian CDs that you had. I also had the same amount in secular hip hop. So it was funny because I felt that Christian hip hop wasn't as good. Mm-hmm. So I was getting my fill for actual rap music from, Ice Cube or NWA or all those guys. Yep. and then it wasn't until about 95, which would have been October. It was my buddy Pat's birthday, and I bought him the Jars of Clay self-titled.
Yep.
I was going to say album, but it was actually cassette.
Yep.
And so I bought him that. So that would have been end of October.
Do you remember the sampler that came out?
I do remember.
The album?
Yeah. There was only there's 2 or 3 songs or something on it.
Yeah, and them talking
and
about the songs.
2 different.
Yeah.
And then they had the acoustic version of Flood.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that would have been end of October, and then about a month later was Jesus Freak and the DC Talk album. It was November, I believe, the 21st.
Yep.
Because my buddy Dan was celebrating his birthday, so we went and I spent $15 on a cassette tape of DC Talk Jesus Freak, and that kind of set that mid 90s was kind of the start of it, and then by about 2000. I was deep into it, listening to everything, and we were at a conference. And as you're saying, what you hear really plays a pivotal role in your life. And I went home and I heard a preacher saying, what you listen to is really going to set a precedence of who you are. And I took a hammer and I smashed every single one of the secular hip hop albums. And I said that was it. I was done with it, and I was just going to go 100% Christian music. And later, a buddy of mine's like, "Why didn't you just sell them? You could have made $1 or $2, and you could have bought more Christian albums." And I'm like, "I guess that would have been smart, but then I would have been giving that to somebody else for them to struggle with." So, not smashed them all up, and that was the start of my collection.
Bonfires were fun. They were actually a fun thing to do when you got into these like modes where you're like, let's just gather up AC/DC and Metallica and let's just have a bonfire. That was actually a ton of fun. Like I came into it and it was a whole new world that opened up for me. I mean, I was totally into hip hop and techno and dance and a lot of different genres. But when I went to the store the first time, I was blown away because for me, Christian music was like choir, whoa, and like hymns. You know what I mean? So when I saw these hip hop artists and like dance and just everything, alternative, I opened it up. And I think for Chris, I think for you and myself, music has been a form of ministry that's been dear to our hearts, right? It's like God's placed it on our hearts, saying that it's more than just music, for entertainment and it's fun to listen to. This is a ministering tool that can, minister to many, many people. I had like death metal CDs in my car, not because I like death metal, because I was driving one time with a guy and he loved death metal. I pop one in and he's like, "Man, this is awesome. Who are these guys?" And I'm like, "These guys are Christian." They're like, "No," it would just floor people. And it was a great way of just opening people up to just how diverse and, when it came to, Christian music. So, but that's pretty funny. So you just destroyed all your kind of Ice Cube and NWA and all that stuff?
Got rid of all that, and it's funny too because you talk about the hardcore and stuff, like those music samplers that they used to come out with in the late '90s if you like this, you should listen to this. That was like I had stacks upon stacks of albums of Tooth and Nail and Solid State and all of these hardcore bands, the mixtapes and that with the hip hop, just so that you could get a feel for Marzil or Play-Doh or Pigeon John or whoever.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to get into hip hop for sure because all three of us are, pretty strong with that genre. But we're going to talk about, CCM. We're going to get into alternative rock. We're going to get into all different genres, even worship. And, we'll talk about a lot of different artists. But I would say that, I think for yourself, for Chris, hip hop, would it be that's kind of where the roots are when it comes to Christian music, would you say?
For me, yeah, I mean, definitely 100%. And I want to take back.
So I need to ask you a question. I need to ask you guys, Chris first, a serious question. Okay, this is hip hop. This is rap.
Yeah.
Do you believe that Carmen did some serious good hip hop rap in the day?
I mean, come on. Look, those were the things that I did see. I did see the Carmen stuff early on.
Yep.
I've seen, which I've come to respect, the first couple DC Talk records. I did hear that stuff. I did.
Free at Last. I mean, come on, that's a classic. Free at Last is a classic.
That's funny.
No, I'm not talking about Free at Last. I'm talking
old school.
I'm talking the first 2 records that are primarily, really before they started showcasing, that other stuff. But the one thing that I did want to say before we moved on was, definitely before this realm, I would say like my 11th, 11th, 12th grade year, my choice of channel to watch by far was definitely Much Music. So I was watching that, from the States, And so I got like MTV, not really my thing, but definitely Much Music. I mean, it was different stuff. I mean, that was your guys' thing, but hopefully that gained some credibility with you Canadians. So I still remember that. I found an old VHS tape that I recorded, their music videos on all the time, and it was a blast. But but definitely the roots were definitely in there, and looking back at the early stuff, which I'm a huge fan of, some of those early stuff, the SFC, yep. The PID, DOC stuff, there was so much good stuff back then.
Idle King. You remember Idle King?
Yeah, Idle King. Yeah, I mean that was a little bit later, but definitely, obviously, like guys like Pigeon, some of those guys who I come to find, and then just like, held a dear place, in my heart for a long, long time. But we could definitely talk about it. But
who was
sure,
the first? Who would you say is the first? And let's not go into like DC talk or any of that type of pop. Let's just talk about hip hop. Who is the first true hip hop artist or band, would you say, in Christian music?
You can go first, John.
Well, I mean, theoretically, you would think that DC Talk was one of those. I remember one of the first ones was Gospel Gangsters for me. Yeah. And it kind of went from there. Anybody who was a part of
No, but not for you personally. Yeah. We can talk about Gospel Gangsters, and we'll get into like, all these like our favorite bands. I'm talking about who really is the pioneer of Christian hip hop.
Yeah, probably.
I was thinking about the other day when I watched that series on Netflix, and it was talking about hip hop evolution, and it was going through just this entire progression. And I remember it too because I was born in '72, and I was into breakdancing, as you know, and all that, right? But I remember Grandmaster Flash and all this stuff. I was very young, but when I'm looking at that, I started to think, wait a minute, if there was a documentary done on Christian music, if they did specifically Christian hip hop, what would that documentary look like?
Yeah, well, it's often accredited, which is sort of mislabeled as Stephen Wiley. Stephen Wiley with the Bible Break, is often considered, the first Christian hip hop, artist. That's only because he was accepted by the mainstream. So he was on a label early on. He had all that Christian cred, because the dude's rapping about, the books of the Bible. Yeah. And so, he's often accredited that, but you can go back and look at artists like MC Sweet. He comes well before that. He put out a vinyl back in 1982-83. Wow. And it was, I believe it was Adam and Eve. So he came out with that. He's definitely there. You had a crew too back in the early '80s. Crews were where it was at in hip hop. Sure. There's a Christian hip hop crew before Stephen Wiley called the Devastation Crew. They come out with a couple vinyl records. I have all that stuff. I would say Stephen Wiley is probably he's like. Like they consider him the OG of the game. Okay. That's only because churches brought him in, and he was not street. He was like church rap.
No, that's crazy too. 82, you said too, right? Like you have a vinyl.
Because really Wiley was more out like 85. Okay, I believe. So
well, let's move on from like hip hop. Actually, this is not hip hop related, but. Maybe you can, if you remember, what was your very first tape or CD, Johnny?
Yeah, mine was Jars of Clay and DC Talk.
Wow, so that was the first time you got introduced to Christian music. That was actually fairly late in the game for you because, like you said, you're already like a late teenager.
That was about the first one that I remember getting the CD and then the tape and then getting the CD after.
Okay, Chris, what about you? What was your very first that you bought, that you went in the store, you actually bought, came home and listened to?
My first purchase was, the first Christian purchase that I made was for Liz, because that was right when that Kirk Franklin album came out.
Which one?
And so that
would be, I guess that would be in 90.
Yeah, that was like 98 maybe.
98, 99? Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, when Stomp came out.
That was the bit, yeah.
Yeah, so that,
People
yeah, it had Stomp and Lean on Me and stuff like that. Gotcha. And I got her that, and I got her another girl band too. It might have been I forget the name of that band right now. But then
that might be trivia later. You better get brushed up on the female bands because it might be good.
Yeah, right. But the first ones that I bought for myself, I had bought probably a collection of records. You know, because by the next time I went in, I was like, I had given up all secular music, so I'm like, I'm ready to fill it. And so I purchased like an Out of Eden record, the Toby Mac album, the Momentum album, and then the DJ Maj Full Plates mixtape volume 2. Purchased that one, and then I purchased there was one other, I forget what it was. But yeah, definitely, it was the DJ Maj album was the first one that I put on, which just like opened that floodgates, and then that led me right to, of course, illegal downloading, of course, because I was already into Napster, I was into LimeWire, I was already there, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start searching, and I when I first got into Christian music, I started to just download stuff before I started to collect the CDs, so I was downloading all these things, finding all these new artists, and I was making mixtapes for the youth group, so we'd play them at all our events. But yeah, so I would say those 3 albums were my first ones.
And do you actually have, and this can be a hard one, so if you can't answer, it's fine, but do you have an actual favorite artist or band, Johnny?
No, I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I racked my brain, and I do not have a favorite.
That's fine, and that's fine. That's tough. What about you, Chris? Do you have a favorite band of all time or artist?
Well, I would segregate them to like genre.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would have to do it that way. Okay. But I would tell you back then, 100% the guy that I identified the most with was definitely Pigeon John. Definitely 100%. Nice. I was like a Pigeon John. Like,
that's funny because Johnny's a huge Pigeon John fan too, right?
Yeah.
Right, Johnny? Or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I saw his first concert in Canada was in Edmonton. So I was there. It was a bar show, and I think I just turned 18.
Yeah. Oh, Pigeon was. Yeah. I mean, we brought Pigeon in for a show. We had a lot of connections to him. Obviously, and then obviously John Rubin was up there. Being in Ohio. And then once Pigeon kind of left the scene, my favorite definitely became Plato, no doubt about it. Nice. Who goes by Crumb now. So that would be in the hip hop realm. But Toby has a special place for us too. He's been around for so long, and we've been following his career. And then each and every genre, obviously we have a favorite, and somebody who is like the top of that chain.
Makes sense. Yeah, and it's a tough question. I was just curious. Myself personally, for band, it's Delirious. All-time favorite band of all time would be Delirious.
Yeah, they're good too.
That's for me anyway. But yeah, I know what you mean by breaking it down by genre. It's tough, right? But let's get into some big bands. Let's get into some trivia right now, and then we can kind of work our way through it. We've still got an hour and a half to go, so there's lots of time to get into all sorts of discussions. But hey, I'll start off with Chris first, and then we'll kind of go back and forth. Let's just see here. Chris, which Christian band has the most Dove Awards?
I would assume that it has to be DC Talk, but maybe I'm completely wrong. I would assume that.
It's actually Steve Curtis Chapman.
Oh, I mean that's another one too. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I would say DC Talk if you include all the Toby stuff. I could guarantee you that is the case. If you add up all of Toby's awards with
that's true. I'm looking at you might be right because I'm looking at an older list here. So we're talking about 5-6 years old, so there might be some stuff. So I mean, if you guys want to say no, this is it, I mean, a lot of them aren't going to be about Dove Awards, they're going to be more like recent, but anyways, that's an interesting thing. We should actually look that one up.
He has like what, 50-ish? How many does he have? 50?
I didn't look it up. I don't know if you're by the computer, Chris. If you're by the computer, I mean, we can look it up while we're going. We might as well do that. It'd be kind of good. Or people
Google.
in the chat, they can tell us for sure. They could do.
Yeah, right.
Google. Okay, so we're gonna go to Johnny here. What Christian band artist has released the most albums?
Newsboys.
No, that's wrong. Chris, do you want to try to go for the steal?
Say that question one more time so that I'm not getting tricked up on it.
Okay. Which Christian band / artist has released the most albums?
Okay, because if we're going artist, I mean, we were talking about this the other day.
It's not him. Now I got to look into this because there must be some things that aren't technically full
because if they're
albums.
not credited,
these are full. Yeah, these are full albums. Which band? I'll make it easy for you guys, anyways. Or band. It's not an artist. It's a band. Which Christian band has released the most albums? Period. Like this is like the band that have basically surpassed them all. There's nobody.
Looking at history, I would assume like a band because they're constantly a group that always changed throughout history. I would say like a group like the Imperials would be something that I would guess, having no clue, but I would assume like a band like that would have. Right. Go ahead.
Answer is Petra. 27 albums.
That would have been my second guess, too.
27 albums. You know how insane that is? 27 albums.
27 albums. 27. How many? And how many lead singers, too? So
that was another trivia. Yeah. So, yeah, you already got that one. So, anyways. Yeah. But, yeah, that's right. Because unbelievable. I'll just say it because it was one of the things you just mentioned it. 23 band members in total. In the changes that occurred over that period of time.
I don't think they have the record, though.
They don't. So who has the record now?
How many?
27 is.
How many did Audio Adrenaline have?
They had nowhere close to 27. Audio Adrenaline?
Dude, no. If you look, and again, this would be one of those caveats. You got to look at regular band members, but they also have the road band members too. I think there was something that I read a while ago that they had. It was them, and there's a couple others that had quite a few.
Okay, someone in that's listening here, watching on YouTube, maybe check it out. Let us know if you can find any evidence as far as the most albums for a Christian band. Is it Petra, or just what is the top amount of albums? Is it 27, which is Petra's record, or you mentioned Audio Adrenaline? I've never even heard of Audio Adrenaline. Like I would have thought, someone else before, like an Audio Adrenaline. They had that many albums. Audio Adrenaline.
No. Band members.
Oh, band members. Oh, your caveat. People that have come out of Audio Adrenaline. Gotcha.
Yes.
All right. So who are all the bands? I'll let you take this one. Who are all the ones that have come out?
Oh, no. I think we're lost in translation. I was talking about how many members have played in Audio Adrenaline.
Okay.
And how many members have also played with Audio Adrenaline on the road.
Yeah. You're talking.
How many members and past members that they've had? I think they had a ton.
But you're even talking about what's his name that joined Audio Adrenaline for like a year or so. You're saying everyone would count.
Yeah, like Kevin Max or
come on, that
whomever.
is like so shady. Seriously, like this is like no.
Well, that's what I said. You got to have a caveat.
I know, but this is a band, so they've actually released it. They've released albums under that band name only. That band name.
Oh, okay.
So
then I don't.
So
no
it was
idea.
like DC Talk. They released, how many? Not even a lot. They released like what, 5?
Yeah,
6
I hear you.
Yeah, this is 27.
I hear you saying. Okay. Yeah. Never mind.
And I do think the Imperials definitely had more than they. I'm already on their discography page, and they've been pumping out albums since the '60s. Throughout the 80s and 90s, so they're well over 50 or 60 albums, no doubt about it.
What about the Gaithers?
The Gaithers, though, because the Gaithers, there were so many groups under the Gaithers, it wouldn't really it wouldn't technically.
Yeah.
No, because there were so many branches under the Gaithers, they could just release it. I remember I was working Christian retail at the time. Anytime a new Gaithers DVD was coming out, there'd be a lineup of like elderly people out the door. I'm not even joking. Like they literally, it was great. It was amazing. It was unbelievable. And that was when, DVDs and CDs and like the whole package would be like, $150. So people didn't care. They loved it. My parents loved the Gaithers. They were definitely well loved. I really never ever loved that genre. That was the only genre. I had a couple CDs just in case someone liked it, but probably country and Southern gospel were my least favorite genres. What about you? What about you, Chris? What was your least favorite genre of Christian music?
I would, coming from the styles that we all liked, I think we're probably all going to say the same thing as what you just said. So yeah, that would definitely be the ones that are just a little like, yeah, that's a little too old for our taste. And now that,
I prefer ska, hip hop versus, rather than Southern gospel. So yeah.
I love ska. So
we'll talk about
cool
ska.
There was a great time. That was
ska. Yeah, the Supertones and all that. Yeah, it was pretty.
Five Iron, man, those were, they were awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk more about like different genres and just kind of blast from the past. But this is fun going through the trivia so far, getting into some different discussions. Who are we on now? Johnny, that was the last question was to you, right? So we're back to Chris.
Yeah, I think so.
Chris, who had the longest running #1 album for a female artist on Billboard Christian album charts? Can you name the album? So who is the female artist with the longest running #1 album? And for bonus points, if you can name the album.
Well, I'm gonna obviously say Amy Grant, and I would say
you would be wrong. Over to Johnny.
I would be wrong.
Is it Rebecca St. James?
Man, no, both are wrong. It's Francesca Battistelli.
Really?
My Paper Heart. Yep.
My Paper. Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? Maybe check on that and see. But like I said, this is what's
no, man. Whatever you say, Robbie, is what it's going to be. I don't care what anybody else says. You can Google it. Whatever Robbie says is what it is.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy. It's just like, all right, okay.
I would have never.
Back to Johnny.
Yeah, no way.
We'll double check these. Like again, if they're wrong, they're wrong. But anyways, I don't believe that these are.
It's fine.
Ready, Johnny? Which sister-based musical group was brought to light by a Super Chick song?
Barlow Girl.
Nice. Ding, ding. There you go. Over to Chris.
Yeah.
Easy one for you, Chris. Which band was born from Rebecca St. James Brothers?
Oh.
Okay. So if I get this question correct, then I get to ask you.
No. Because it's so stupid easy, and Johnny will be absolutely really upset if I even allow you to answer this. You have to go a little deeper. What are the brothers' last names?
Okay.
Gosh.
So if you let me, if I get this right, I get to ask you, Robbie, a trivia question about this band.
That's funny.
Well, sure. I'm not the expert, but I'll play.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Of course, it is King and Country. No doubt about it.
Actually,
it is
no,
Joel.
that is wrong. It is for King and Country. I'm just
okay.
I'm joking.
For King and Country.
You imagine?
Or they could go.
Sorry, you lose.
Okay, so for King and Country.
Oh, there we go.
Or you could go by their previous band before they the brothers together before they became For King and Country, which was Joel and Luke, of course. Mm-hmm. And so Joel and Luke Smallbone, of course, is their last names. Now I'm going to ask you a trivia question.
All right, which I probably won't.
Okay, so Joel.
Can we pass it to Johnny if I don't know?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
So Joel Smallbone, before he was in Joel and Luke, because that was before For King and Country, what band was he in? You can't look this up. You can't look it up.
That is, I'm not. I wouldn't look it up. This is over to Johnny. This is.
It starts with an A. It starts with an A. That's all I got. I don't remember what it's called. That's all I remember.
Well, according to my alphabet, it starts with the letter F, and it is the band called Fusebox. So if you go look that up, so Fusebox, Joel Smallbone was in Fusebox.
I know that that album rings a bell. Am I wrong on that?
They had 2 albums. I don't know if he was on the first album or not, but he was definitely in the band by the second album. And really cool. History. Obviously, those guys are one of our favorites as well. But
we didn't know we were bringing on For King and Country expert Chris Bailey tonight. I mean, oh my goodness! I thought I had one. I think we talked about it like a few weeks back, but a lot of people really don't know what their last names are. But you just won up me and Johnny and the whole crew there. So we'll go back to Johnny on this one, and it's fairly easy, but not so much. The first part of the question is easy. What country did the Newsboys come from? But that's not the part. What was their original name? I know you're. I mean, anyone. If someone got this question wrong as far as the first part, what country did they come from? The real big trivia part is what was their original name? Johnny.
Can I tell you also a story about the Newsboys?
Oh, of course. This is why we're doing the show. Story time.
Okay. Well, they are from Australia.
Yes.
I saw them in concert with Petra.
Nice.
And all I wanted was to get their autograph. That's all I was hoping. I was one of those kids who wanted to get an autograph from Peter Furler and from Phil Joel.
Yeah.
And I went to go and I asked Peter for an autograph, and he told me, "Get away, kid. I'm too busy." And then he went and talked to a bunch of women.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so I got blown off by Peter Furler, and then I hung out with Phil Joel, and it was a lot of fun.
I hung out with Duncan at West Edmonton Mall, but before I get into that, let's talk to Chris. Chris, do you have any Newsboys stories? Just because.
Well, I do, but he hasn't. He didn't even answer the question. He's like skating out of it.
Oh, he is skating out.
No,
of it.
I don't know what the answer is.
Are you serious? You don't know?
No, I don't know.
I always thought it was just.
We're going over to Chris for this one for the steal.
Okay, for the steal. I believe it was just news, right? The news.
Correct. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
And just a disclaimer here, just for everyone that's listening in, I don't advocate for stealing. All right, that's wrong, and we'll move on now. All right, just a term, just in case people get all up in arms about it. He stole. Man, you guys. Well, let's go over to Chris.
Your Newsboys, I've probably seen the Newsboys perform. I don't know.
Well, here's a quick story with Newsboys.
20 times?
Yeah, I've seen 20 times too, and I'm sure. How many times have you seen them, Johnny?
Yeah, a ton.
A 20?
I have no idea.
Yeah, something like that.
At least 20.
So yeah, I had the privilege of driving them to West Edmonton Mall when they were in Edmonton. They were doing a book signing at my store. Anyways, we arranged a thing. Anyways, we went to West Edmonton Mall. We're hanging out, and Phil and Joel, they're all running around. I'm with Duncan, the drummer. Anyways, these guys run off. I lose track of them. I cannot find them in West Edmonton Mall. It's the largest mall in all of North America. Their concert's coming up. The manager's yelling at me. They have to do sound check. So I had to get them paged by security. No joke. West Edmonton Mall paged them with the Newsboys, come to security desk, blah, blah, blah. Literally. And I remember looking at Duncan. I'm like, what the heck? And he's just rolling his eyes. He's like, those guys. Like, there's definitely some weird dynamics with that crew. But what a talented group. Here's a question for you, though. Do you like new Newsboys or old Newsboys? I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Chris.
Well, I mean, the first couple Newsboys albums that were on Star Song were really, really good. If you go back and listen to their, I believe it's the He's Coming Back album, which is like their first one. It's really not that good.
Well, yeah, so you know what I mean, though. I'm talking about, Newsboys. And then when the guys left, and all of a sudden,
John, the original singer who had to leave due to substance abuse, I wasn't like a huge fan, but they had a good sound. They were actually, if you guys didn't know, I'm not going to ask a trivia question. I'm just going to flat out tell you. So the metal band Bride, Snakes in the Playground record, both Peter and John are doing backing vocals on two of the songs, which is crazy to see Bride basically featuring Newsboys on their metal album, which is totally faux pas, of course, for any metal fan to go, oh, Newsboys are on there, especially in the early 90s. But I thought that was pretty cool. I actually just learned that just a couple weeks ago, looking through the liner notes on the actual physical CD. So, obviously that's a lost thing. But then when, the Newsboys were really at their height when Peter fully took over as the lead, and all the huge hits, that they came out with. I mean, nothing can compare to that. 90s music is just by far more sentimental to all of us. So I think we're all probably going to say, yeah, that, as great as Michael Tate is, as great as even some of the, like the United stuff, they got some good songs.
Yeah.
As much as, they blew it out of the park with God's Not Dead and all that stuff and huge chart toppers. Still that 90s is more of a sentimental. It is what Newsboys is now. It's just Michael Tate leading his own sort of band. You know what I mean? So
what do you think? What do you think, Johnny? Are you kind of the same way?
Yeah, my two favorite albums was the end of the John era, beginning of the Peter era, and Take Me to Your Leader and Step On Up to the Microphone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that was what, mid to late 90s, 96 and 98 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are kind of my two favorites. And yeah, now it is the Michael Tate Band, also known as Newsboys.
There you go. Chris, over to you. The questions to Chris now, right? Because you did the last one, Newsboys. Yes. Chris, which Christian band started off as a college worship team?
College worship team. Which band?
A lot of them.
All of them. All of them. Can you get a little bit more specific?
How many college though? I mean, a lot of them met like in high school. Well, yeah, I guess college and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Well, name a band that started off as a college worship team. That's the keyword. The keyword's worship team. It's not like it's not like DC Talk that got to meet each other.
Yeah.
College. This is a worship. There was a college worship team. And then they became a big band in Christian music. Can you name the band? And if not, we'll pass it over to Johnny, see if he can.
I'm gonna pass.
You don't even want to guess?
Well,
let's go for Johnny.
Yeah, go, Johnny.
No, I mean, this is probably not the one you're thinking of, but Down Here met at Briarcrest, and they were doing worship for Briarcrest before they became Down Here.
Just because you're Canadian doesn't mean you have to slant everything. You don't have to slant everything, eh?
Listen, you asked the question. I gave you an answer. If you don't like it, then
no, it's right. I mean, that would be right. The one that they have is obviously a huge band, David Crowder Band. They formed out of Baylor University. So no, I mean you're right. There are multiple bands, and it's kind of one of those things. But again, I think any one would be correct. So even Canadians, get that one. Got that one. It's like A. All right, let's go with something here a little bit different. Let's see here. Which active Christian band artist has been around the longest and still active today?
Oh, man. Well, again, Toby seems way too easy.
Yeah, this one it's tough because we're dealing with like an old chart that I found or whatever. It's not that old, but what it's saying is that Petra started in 1972 is currently active. Is Petra at all active?
I mean,
is any member of Petra? I mean, it's kind of one of those technical questions, right? But I mean, wow, well, they started in 1972. That is insane. Insane. Yeah. They started the band in 72.
Well, I mean, they've obviously had so many leads. Greg unfortunately passed away this year, and then what's crazy is in our circle, Robbie, the prophecy, sort of the French Christian conspiracy circles. I saw that John of Petra is actually speaking at a prophecy conference, which I thought was really, really cool. And Cutlass is actually opening up doing worship at this event in Texas, and it's got all the other big, prophecy speakers and all that kind of stuff there. And John is of Petra is doing a session there. I don't know what he's talking on, but. And so, yeah, I know they still play some shows, but it's very, very small, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's get into some more key specific ones. Over to you, Johnny, with this one. What is the name of Casting Crowns' August 2007 album release? All Because of Jesus, The Altar and the Door, Every Man, or Life Song?
2007 Casting Crowns.
Yeah, All Because of Jesus, The Altar and the Door, Every Man, or Life Song. There's 4 choices there.
Well, Life Song was 2005, so it's not that one. Let's go with The Altar and the Door.
You're going to go with Altar and the Door.
Well, I know it's not. I know it's not. I know it's not.
You
Lifestyle,
would
so.
be correct. Good job. Nicely done. That is correct. Also, that was 2007, Casting Crowns. And for bonus, do you know how Casting Crowns formed?
As a band.
Nice. Nicely done. Nicely done. All right, let's go to Chris for the next one. Here.
Were they not a worship band too? Weren't because it's funny because you just said Cutlass and I think they started as a worship band. And I think Chris was saying Cutlass and I think that they formed as well in college and I think Casting Crowns did the same thing.
Okay, we're talking about. Let's see here. I'm just going to look if we have answer on casting.
Because they were from they started in Florida, didn't they?
Yeah, I saw it before here, but anyways, it wasn't showing up on that one. But
where are you, Google, when we need you?
No. I'm just. Anyways, okay. So here we go. This is over to Chris. Which 33 Miles album was released on April 10th, 2007? 33 Miles. What could be better? Hold On, or There Is a God?
What year is that?
2007.
Say him one more time.
Which 33 Miles album was released on April 10th, 2007? Okay, here's the choices. 33 Miles.
Okay, the self-titled.
Second
yeah.
choice.
It was a self-titled. It was a self-titled one. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Hold On.
Self-titled.
Or There Is a God.
You don't even need to do it. It's a self-titled one.
All right.
I remember.
You got it.
Yeah.
You totally got it. Absolutely. It is.
I have them all categorized for sale right now. That's
funny.
Yeah. So that's the oldest one. Yeah.
All right, we're over to Johnny for question number 3 in this round. In 2000, For Him released an album of which type of classic Christian songs? Ballads, praise choruses, hymns, or worship songs?
I'm going to pass on this one. I don't listen to For Him, so this is definitely not something that I have no idea.
Do you even listen to For Him?
I have a bunch of For Him, especially the early stuff.
So would you like to try this one in 2000, the 2000 album? What type of classic Christian songs were they doing an album of?
I mean, I would assume I heard those titles. It definitely wouldn't be ballads. That's just weird. So I would assume that it would be classic hymns, of course. I mean, being church
hymns.
stuff.
Let's go with hymns and see what we got here. You would be right.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense.
Good for you. Good for you.
It's like good for you. Aaron Schuss' lyric, "My Savior's Always There," ends with what? This is for Johnny. Aaron Schuss' lyric.
Is it Schust?
Schust.
Yeah.
Sorry, Schust. Aaron Schuss' lyric, "My Savior's Always There," ends with what? For the world, for you, for us, or for me?
I can't even think of the song. No idea.
Chris, you want to go for it?
Come on, Chris.
"My Savior's Always There," ends with what?
I'm phoning a friend.
Yeah.
Come on, Chris.
Man, that's a tough.
It is a tough one. There's no doubt about it.
That's a tough one.
Let's take a stab at it and we'll find out what it is.
Okay. I'm gonna say this. I have no clue, but everybody needs to go listen to one of the guys I was going to bring to Take on the World, which is Joshua Aaron. He is great friends with Aaron Schuss, and they have a song. I believe Aaron Schuss wrote it. It's called "There Is None Like You," and or they co-wrote it together, and they both perform it. It's phenomenal. They performed it in Israel together. It's killer. So I have no clue on the question, but
always there. Let's go for me, for you, for my Savior's always there.
Oh, let's go for me. My Savior's always there for me.
That's what I'm choosing myself. Yep, that's the answer.
I like it. Go for it.
Let's do it. Okay.
Yes.
For me.
I actually
nice.
got
we did it.
So. All right, so we're back over to Chris. What band sold over 2 million copies of their album, The Beautiful Letdown?
I mean, come on. I mean,
I don't pick.
Really?
Some easy ones, some hard ones. So go ahead. You gotta remember, there's a lot of people.
Of course, the Switchfoot. Of course, that's Switchfoot. Of course.
All right. Hey, and for bonus questions, what sport is Switchfoot named after?
I would think soccer.
Surfing.
Surfing.
You would be right, Johnny.
Yeah,
Would be
that would make much more sense compared to that they're a band from California. Yeah,
Can I give you a quick story?
You can. We love stories.
Okay. Very first Canadian concert that Switchfoot ever played was just outside of Edmonton in a small town city called Stony Plain.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
really?
And they were opening for Plum.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And that was in Stony. Who organized a concert in Stony Plain?
You remember Harvest Moon?
I do. Yes.
It was for Harvest Moon.
A little festival.
But it was rainy, it was cold, and Switchfoot was opening up for Plum, and they were the two big bills on the festival.
Wow. Remember Plum, eh?
And who would have ever thought, New Way to Be Human was a great song.
So good.
But who would have thought that they would have then been a huge mainstream success?
Oh yeah, the first album.
I would have never thought
guessed it. I would have never thought it. The first one, no.
It's amazing what A Walk to Remember does for a band.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That is very true. But even if you look at the very, very first album, it wasn't even that good. Do you even like it? Did you like their very first album?
Well,
that's probably one of my faves.
Let me ask you.
Like it. I just didn't like it. I just never got into it.
Let me ask you guys a question then. Which iconic artist/producer produced that album? The Beautiful Letdown.
Oh, I thought you were talking about A New Way to Be Human.
No, Beautiful Letdown, which obviously sold millions, 2 million, and which producer? Don't look it up.
Just tell us, because now you're showing off.
Yeah.
That would be Charlie Peacock.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Charlie Peacock. He's done a lot of stuff in Christian music, that's for sure. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, he did their Learning to Breathe album too.
I believe he did. Yeah.
Some. I think he did some of it. If I remember correctly.
Where is Charlie Peacock, anyways? Does anyone know? Hey, after the messages, we're going to be right back. So don't go anywhere. That was hour 1. Stay tuned for hour 2. We're going to get into some more trivia with Johnny Rocket and Chris Bailey. You're listening to Celebrate Truth Radio. We'll be back with you right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Radio at FreedomSlips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
That's right here, Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Hello, Karl Marx here. Look at my wonderful hair. Notice how I sweep it back.
Karl?
I call it the 360 sweep. Beard, sideburns, and the magnificent coif.
Karl!
What? What is this?
You're on the radio. They can't see you.
Oh, yeah, I get confused.
Want to learn more about the Marxist agenda and other important stuff? Listen to The Ultimate Remedy with L.B. Bork, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Revolution Radio.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at FreedomSlips.com.
All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Welcome back to Celebrate Truth Radio. This is Hour 2. Our special guests are Johnny Rocket and Chris Bailey. We're doing Christian music trivia flashback show this evening, and what a show it's been. We're going over now to Johnny Rocket for the next question. This is an interesting one. I would have never got this one. Which of these is often used?
Great.
Which of these is often used to refer to fans of the band Skillet? Potheads, fry babies, cookers.
Panheads.
Panheads. You would be correct. We're on to the next question. We're going over to Chris Bailey for the next one.
That was an easy one.
Which singer opened Rocketown, a Christian nightclub for teens? Was it Kirk Franklin, Steve Curtis Chapman, Amy Grant, or Michael W. Smith?
That would be Michael W. Smith.
And you would be correct, sir. I'm just looking at it now. I'm just seeing if I would get these. And some of them are easy, some of them are a little tough. I wonder how the people that are in YouTube chat right now are fending. Maybe we should see what we'll get into a discussion with them and see what they want to talk about afterwards. But I definitely want to talk about the 90s when we get through this. We've got about 20 more questions to go. It seems all three of us in here. We can stop at any time, but this is fun. People are enjoying it. Who won 2 Dove Awards with their song Fireproof?
Oh man!
So what I'm going to do is, if you don't know, basically I can give you the hint, and I can give you a choice out of 4. I think it'd be easier for you guys, especially if you're caliber. So if you're kind of old man already, I'm going to give you the 4 choices. All right? It's either.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to say it's either POD, Cutlass, 38th Parallel, or Pillar.
Yeah, it's Pillar. It's Pillar, but I was also thinking of the movie Fireproof. And so then I'm like, was that a... Yeah, I was like, But Pillar.
Over to Chris. Who might be described as the greatest guitar player you've never heard?
Phil Keaggy.
Ooh.
Nice. I didn't even give you the 4 choices. Let's see if you're right. And you are correct. The choices were Steve Camp, Steve is Curtis Chapman, Larry Norman, or Steve Keaggy. Interesting. I would have probably gone with Larry Norman just because, but then again, people have heard of him. Phil Keaggy, you got the answer correct. We're going over to Johnny here for question number 11 in this trivia. Which Christian pop punk band recorded The Anatomy of Tongue and Cheek?
Reliant K.
All right, we're going with Ryan K. You are correct. Well played. We're going over to Chris Bailey now. Which band opened for Peter Gabriel during his 2002 World Tour?
Peter Gabriel.
Which band?
Which band opened?
Which band opened for Peter Gabriel during his 2002 World Tour? If you don't, I'll give you the 4 choices. That's all cool. It's just bonus points.
Yeah.
It's Over the Rhine, The Blind Boys of Alabama, Point of Grace, or Mighty Clouds of Joy.
Over the Rhine.
We're going with Over the Rhine, and incorrect. You are wrong. The correct answer is The Blind Boys of Alabama.
Boys of Alabama.
Would you have got that, Johnny? I wouldn't have got that. Like that was tough.
No, it was a total guess. 100%
Yeah.
it was a
Okay,
guess.
that's cool. It's good to be honest. This is Celebrate Truth Radio.
Let me give you a trivia question there. Which band, okay, or which famous band frontman found the band Over the Rhine?
Going to you, Johnny.
And they weren't Christian, and they weren't a Christian band.
Oh.
Because Over the Rhine's like sort of like in both camps,
sure.
Secular and Christian. Yeah.
Not sure. Tell us.
No idea. Go for it.
Michael Stipe.
Michael Stipe.
R.E.M.
Interesting. All right, we're going to. Who was the last question? I just lost track there with that segue. Who got the last question? That was.
Oh, just throw it out. Throw it out there. We'll get this.
Right, here we go.
We've teamed up together now.
Right. Which band released the hit singles "If We Are the Body" and "Voices of Truth"?
Casting Crowns.
Yeah, I think it was you anyway. So we're going over to Chris Bailey. Now you guys are like on a roll, like literally.
When we get to the final 10, let us duel.
Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it there. Just duel now. It's totally fine. Like I said, these aren't too complex. They're not too hard. We're over to you, Chris. Which band released the hit single "What If People Prayed"?
What if people prayed? Oh man, why does that sound so familiar?
You can't ask for the 4 choices too.
Okay, give me the 4 choices.
Casting Crowns, Cutlass, Jars of Clay, or Third Day.
What if people prayed?
It's off their 2003 album.
Wow. Show off.
Yeah. Why is this? Why am I not grabbing this?
I don't know.
Why am I not,
okay.
Give me 1 second. Look, I'm thinking. What if?
Yeah,
people
you got Liz
prayed?
Googling right now. It's like,
No.
I'm just kidding. It's all good.
What if people pray? I mean, I would think that maybe. All right, I'm just going with it. 2003. That wouldn't be Cutlass.
No,
it's not. It's not Casting Crowns. What were the other 2 choices?
Jars of Clay, or Third Day, are the other 2 choices.
It wasn't Jars.
I thought
Come Together
would go
was
with Casting Crowns. Myself personally, I would choose Casting Crowns.
I'm gonna go with Third Day because that's the only one left. But
what would you say, Johnny?
I don't think it is.
It was one of their first radio singles. It was Casting Crowns.
Yeah, I know. I remember that too because I remember seeing them for the very first thing in Atlanta for the GMA or I forget what it was, whatever conference I was at, and they were opening up. It was like.
But that was the name of the album?
No.
It was their self-titled. I think it was their debut. It was Casting Crowns.
Yeah. But I thought.
Song. Yeah. What if people?
We were talking a song. Because I didn't.
Yeah, I said what song people prayed. Anyways, let's go to the next one.
Okay, sorry.
We're going to Johnny. Oh my goodness, I'm going to skip this one just a sec. Oh, actually, no.
Well, what was it?
No, I'm not going to skip it. Which Christian college was the birthplace of DC Talk?
Liberty
University. You would be correct. Nicely done. See, it's funny because a lot of people here would get 4 choices and you guys are answering them without the 4 choices. Interesting. All right, over to Chris. Which band took inspiration from Psalm 1, The Altar, and The Door? Wow. I can give you the 4 if you need it.
Yeah, give me the 4.
So which band took inspiration from Psalms 1, The Altar, and The Door? Casting Crowns, David Crowder Band, Newsboys, or Delirious?
Well, since that's the name of their album, I would have to say Casting Crowns, but maybe
good
it's a
choice.
Yeah, it is.
maybe it's a trick question.
Yeah, it is. It's like they're going to town with the Casting Crowns here. All right,
I
let's go
know.
to you, Johnny.
Yeah.
What Christian musical stars in the film The Second Chance?
The Second Chance. I don't even know if I've seen. Robbie, you're the film guy.
Well, what Christian?
Michael W. Smith.
Let's go with it because the choices were Brandon Heath, Michael W. Smith, Toby Mac, or Jeremy Camp. Let's
Michael
go with
W. Smith.
Yeah,
You got
if
it.
that
Correct.
was the choices, yeah.
You got it correct.
Mike-
Well, I would have
Michael
given
W.
you. Hey,
Smith.
you can't interject before he gets a chance to ask for.
He wasn't
his
getting
score.
it.
He can say 4.
We're a
please. I need my
team.
4.
We're good.
No, okay. You want to be a team up to the last 10? All right, because we're approaching the last 10 here. We're at 18 out of 30.
Okay.
So we'll go 2 here. Okay. All right. Shane Bernard of which band conceived "We Love You, Jesus" in a coffee shop?
Shane and Shane.
Yeah.
Shane and Shane. Let's go with it. Correct. You are right.
And we brought Shane and Shane in for concerts, and we hung out with them for a while. So
Very
cool guys.
All right,
Yeah.
so here's the last one before the big duel, and it is who hit number. I thought we were doing duel for most of this thing, but now we're not. Who hit number 1? Oh my goodness! Forget. Yeah, no wonder this is not the duel yet. Who hit number 1 in the secular charts in 1996 with the single "Flood"? Do you want your 4 choices, or do you want to just go with it?
Oh, man.
All right, let's go.
It's a tough one.
All right, so here's the duel. Here's the duel.
Name the song that,
From
or name the movie it was in.
From what? Yeah, Hard Rain.
Hardware, you got it. There it is.
Nicely done. All right, here we go. Here's the duel. We're over to Chris. Which album? Oh, actually, are we at Johnny or anyways? Chris. Which album won Amy Grant her first Dove Award? Which album won Amy Grant her first Dove Award? Remember, you can ask for your 4.
Give me those.
Simple Things, Amy Grant's Greatest Hits, Age to Age, or Rock of Ages?
I would assume Age to Age.
You're going to go with Age to Age, and Chris is correct with the first question. Over to Johnny. Who sings Our Great God?
Baby.
Who sings Our
What?
Great God with Tom Agnew on his album Better Questions? Who sings Our Great God with Todd Agnew on his album Better Questions? You can ask for the 4, remember.
Yeah, give me the 4.
Jeremy
I think it's someone, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, Jeremy Camp, Brendan Heath, Rebecca St. James, or Mendiza?
Oh man, and none of those were the ones that I thought of either.
Well,
Chris, what do you think?
What is it again?
Who sings Our Great God with Todd Agnew on his album Better Questions?
Who was that?
Was it Jeremy
that was
Camp, Brendan Heath, Rebecca St. James, or Mendiza?
It's I don't. I would assume that would be. It was a female, and it wasn't Mendiza, so it'd have to be Rebecca St. James.
Let's go with Rebecca, and you are right.
That's a good guess.
Rebecca Smallbone, you are correct. All right. Let's go to which. Actually, she's married now, so she's not that anymore. That was her maiden name. Which singer divorced Gary Chapman and later married Vince Gill? This is for Chris.
If you say Jeremy Camp, you are wrong.
This is for Chris. Which singer divorced Gary Chapman and later married Vince Gill?
That would be Baby, Amy Grant.
Baby, Amy Grant. You are correct. Over to Johnny, who released a 2001 song about the 3 sisters in a band, Barlow Girl.
This is the second time you got it.
Yeah, what the heck? Super Chick. And who are also sisters. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
That is kind of strange, yeah.
Sisters singing about sisters.
Let's go over to Chris because it's getting a little weird there. All right, Brian.
Yeah, all the boys in the band want a Valentine.
Here's one for Chris. Brian Reinhardt of what band had a role as a double in the movie Radio?
Say that one more time.
Brian Reinhardt of what band had a role as a double in the movie Radio?
Okay, I might need the choices on this.
All right, Hawk Nelson.
Why do I need the choices on this?
It's all good. Choices are good. Hawk Nelson, Need to Breathe, Brendan Heath, or Out of Eden? I probably would go with Not Out of Eden on that one.
Not Out of... Say them one more time. I could do this.
So I'll give you the 3. Brendan Heath, Need to Breathe, or Hawk Nelson?
I have a guess.
Well, you can guess if Chris doesn't.
No, I know.
I would have to assume Need to Breathe.
So let's go with Need to Breathe. You are correct.
Baron Bow.
Yeah, because there ain't no... Yeah. I know all the guys in Hawk Nelson, so yeah, no.
This would be interesting because I'm sure a lot of people, you guys, this is going to be stupid easy, but it's interesting. Let's actually, have fun with this one because it's so easy for you guys. And in the YouTube chat, if anyone is in there right now and you want a trivia question, you want your option to try to answer it. Let's go with this one, and we'll see how well they fare. Who is Kevin Michael McKeenan, also known as? Again, who is Kevin Michael McKeenan, also known as? Do not look it up. Post it. First person to post it, you guys have won. Let's just take a look and see. We'll take a little break before we go to the next one. This is an easy one for you guys. So I'll select it already, and I'm going to move on. I got it correct, so I'm doing pretty good.
I can tell you, whoever did that, those parents are prophetic.
Yeah. So again, remember the question: who could get it? First person that gets it. My sister's actually in the chat right now. How you doing, Melissa? You should know this.
What?
Answer the question. Who can be the first one in the chat right now on YouTube to answer it? There might be a prize. There might not be. We don't know, but let's just see. These guys are just dying right now. These guys are like freaking out. They're just going, what? No one knows.
You win absolutely nothing.
Nobody. Like everyone's Googling it right now or something.
Their parents are prophets.
Nobody
because,
knows.
I mean, how could you name your child that having no what's about to happen? Kevin Michael McKeon.
Okay,
I mean, come on.
Kevin Michael McKeenan. All right, so maybe you say it too, Johnny, just so people can hear it.
He was born in the 60s.
Well, I don't know, man. Maybe it just went dead. Maybe everyone's dumbfounded, but no one is giving an answer. It's taking a long time, unless there's a massive delay, but we'll come back to that one. Shame on you, chat. Shame on you. If you come here for Christian music, this one you should get. My sister should get. We're going to talk later, Melissa, seriously. You're like, look, she's like dumbfounded. She cannot figure out.
We've already talked about him a couple times.
Yeah, we've already talked about him, so see if you guys can get it. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. All right, over to you, Chris. What worship song begins Light of the World? You step down into darkness. What worship song? I can give you the 4 choices. This is a little hard when it gets to worship music. I'll give you the 4. Here I Am to Worship, Forever, Shine, Jesus, Shine, or You Are My Light.
That would be the Tim Hughes song, Here I Am to Worship.
Here I Am to Worship, and you are correct.
Ding, 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 ding.
Over to Johnny Rocket. Which band recorded the 2002 hit Audience of One?
I have it. I know it. No pressure. No pressure.
He still gets his 4 if he needs his 4.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, give me the 4 just for giggles.
Which band recorded the 2002 hit Audience of One? Your 4 choices are Sanctus Real, Switchfoot, Hawk Nelson.
I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. The only one that I could think of is not those bands. Who is it, Chris?
It is Sanctus Real, of course.
Sanctus Real for the win. You got it. Yeah, it is.
I love that song. Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't have got it.
Because didn't Big Daddy Weave also have an Audience of One song that was one of the radio singles?
There were a lot of them, but 2002 was the key name for that one. Yeah.
We'll go to Chris for this one. The lyric "Turn me around, pick me up, undo what I've become" is from whose song?
Ooh.
Turn me around, pick me up, undo what I've become is from whose song?
Oh.
I can give you the 4.
Wow. Yeah, do it. Turn me around.
We got Rush of Fools, Falling Up, David Crowder Band, or MXPX.
Definitely not MXPX. Turn me around.
It was their worship song.
Yeah, it was their worship song. Now that they're full-blown atheist. I would say David Crowder Band.
Rush of Fools.
Rush of Fools. Killed me.
For the record, Robbie, I just looked at my Big Daddy Weave. Their Audience of One also came out in 2002.
Wow, look at that.
Wow, interesting. Well, sorry, who's your choice on that, Chris?
Rush of Fools.
I missed it. Rush of Fools.
Okay, correct. Wow. All right, so here's the last 2 questions. And this is over to Johnny. Which Christian rapper appears in the rock opera Hero?
Too easy.
Oh, like, well, this is seriously, this is hip hop?
So easy.
This is for you, Johnny. You're never going to live this down because this is like right when we started the show, it was all about hip hop. And everyone's like, everyone, would they stop talking about hip hop? We're right back to hip hop. This is right to you. Which Christian rapper appears in the rock opera Hero? I can give you the four.
The only one.
I can give you the four.
Sure, go for it.
We got KJ52, T-Bone, The Ambassador, or Toby Mac.
See, every time I think of the hero rock opera, I'm thinking of Tate and them. Who is it there, Chris?
All right. So, all right.
You got a story coming up. I could just tell.
Yeah. I mean,
tell.
I went to the Cleveland one, of course. So I saw that back in the day.
Oh, cool.
I mean, look, there's a couple of hip hop artists in there. There were Grits. Grits was there.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, you had Grits there, but no, of course. But the biggest track from there that is carried on, that's actually a song you could listen to, because the rest of it goes along with the play. It was "Raised in Harlem" by T-Bone, of course.
The Boney Soprano.
T-Bone, yes, no doubt about it.
What a classic. Okay, we're over to Chris.
Because I remember they had Skillet on there, they had Grits on there, Paul Wright was on there, but yeah, I don't
what was Paul? T-Bone. Okay, here's one for Johnny.
Oh no, that's right. T-Bone did that with he did who was the girl that he did the radio single with? Was it Stacey or Rico?
Rico, I think, yes.
So here's my question for you, because you just
Life of a Hoodlum. I literally wore that CD out, man. I wore that CD out. Oh man,
that was a great one. Here's my question for you though, before we move off of Paul Wright though. So Paul Wright, of course, awesome artist.
Love Paul.
What was Paul Wright's hip hop name?
Ooh.
Oh, you know what? I don't remember. That's a great question. That's a good one.
Well, yeah, that was so a good friend of mine. His name is MG the Visionary. So I used to be friends with MG a long time ago. MG was in a band. It was called the Have Nots with Paul Wright, and Paulie Paul was his name. So there you have it. There's a little trivia. And so if you go back to the MG the Visionary album, or on the Sinner's Prayer hip hop album that was put out on BEC Tooth and Nail Records, you'll see Paulie Paul on the back of both of those albums, and that is Paul Wright. So
the only time that I ever saw Paul Wright in concert was he was in an 8-hour drive. So I finished up doing our drive show, and I drove 8 hours for the next night to go and see Paul Wright perform, and then drove all the way back to do the morning show the next morning. And I got him to sing the Flip Flop song to my wife, because that was the one and only song that she loved from him.
Yeah. Oh, Flip Flops was great. But the other trivia that I have that you probably both don't know, Paul Wright also started another band. He was from Oregon, and there's another guy tearing up the charts today who's he's another goatee artist who's just he's been dominating the charts for a few years now. He's been doing really well. And they were in a band called maybe Not Your Average Joe. I'm botching that probably, but the other artist that Paul Wright started that band with was Ryan Stevenson, who's tearing up charts now. Yeah, so
he just celebrated his birthday in January.
Yeah, so he's old. He's been around the block. He's been here. He's been doing this since the '90s, and Paul obviously dropped first, and then Ryan, he got signed to Goatee as well. So,
all right.
I had a random.
Oh, go ahead. No, don't do it, Johnny.
No, I was gonna. Well, no, I just said that I had a random trivia question the other day that somebody had asked me, and Ryan Stevenson was the answer, and that's how I knew that he was born in January. It's weird. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. We got the last question going to Chris Bailey. Which group is made up of 4 women who are wives and mothers, as well as vocalists?
Wives and mothers.
As well as vocalists.
I mean, wives and mothers, like.
I can give you the 4.
To each other, or what? What do you mean? What do you mean?
I guess they're wives and mothers, so they have children, and they're all married.
Okay, I mean,
they're all.
I mean, can I just pick a band? I mean, like Point of Grace. I mean, I assume they all married.
Okay, here's the 3 choices: Super Chick, Marlowe Girl, Point of Grace, or Acapella. You want to go with Point of Grace?
I would doubt, no doubt, say Point of Grace, yeah.
I would too. Yeah, and nicely done. You got the correct answer to that one. That's what I would have picked. Actually, I was going to bring Point of Grace up. Do you actually have any Point of Grace? I mean, I know you have it, but did you listen to that type of music?
You know, Liz actually, you know, she was part of youth groups and stuff. So when we started dating, you know, her CD collection consisted of Newsboys,
Sure.
Point of Grace, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, you know, I was familiar with all that. I actually have a Point of Grace vinyl record.
Cool.
So not that it's like my proud. It's not my proud moment or something.
No, but you got some pretty cool vinyl, that's for sure. But let's get into, for you guys, let's go over to Johnny. What was your favorite concert of all time? Or what comes to memory as kind of like a real serious concert that really stays, you know, with you over time, that you remember and you loved?
I think a lot of the ones that stick out to me are a lot of the firsts.
Okay.
So, I mean, the first time Skillet ever came to Canada, I had a chance to see him. The first time Switchfoot ever came to Canada, I had a chance to see him. But I think the one that'll stick out will be the first time that John Rubin ever came to Canada, because it was the night that I met my wife.
Oh,
and
right.
I rehashed it with Rubin. Like I had said at the beginning of the show, you can hear him on my podcast coming up in a couple weeks. But she was sitting there and was not impressed. She was not a John Rubin fan. And I looked back and she's just sitting there with her arms crossed. And I walked up to her and I said, "You can't sit down at a show like this." And she smiled. I got her number later, and 17 years later, we're still together.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's an awesome story. I remember you saying that before, telling the story. That's so funny how you just approached her that way.
Yeah.
You're like, look,
so
you should be sitting down for this. This is John Rubin.
Right? So that was probably my most memorable one, because it was the one that I met my wife.
Oh, that's going to be a great show. I can't wait to hear that podcast. Does he know personally? Have you talked with him, you know, in the years that have followed, like based on the story that it was at, you know, his concert that you and Crystal met?
Yeah, I've told him a couple times, and I've also my wedding song was a song from Cutlass, and I had a chance to talk with John Micah Summerall one time, telling him that, hey, just so you know, my first dance was to you guys. So he said he was honored, and so I was like, yeah, it's something that we could do.
What about you, Chris? What was one of your, I guess, like, and again, this would be something you went to, not that you put on.
Okay, brace yourself for a long one. Because I got a couple things I got to share.
It's all good.
But yeah, definitely. You know, look, I mean, John is, you know, seeing John, because we were we even became friends with Alon. So this was back in the day, like that Christian bookstore that I told you about, that they pay 30-40% off on Friday nights. They'd also do live music too. So we got Alon to come down, and he rapped for us down there. So we, you know, I mean, he just came out for free. And, you know, I used to manage a local Christian hip hop artist in the area. But yeah, I mean, all the John stuff, I mean, all those shows were so impactful. You know, funny enough, I'm good friends, and one of the speakers who spoke at Take on the World last year, I don't know if you got a chance to meet him, Robbie, he shared his testimony about his daughter last year on the main stage. I highly recommend you watching it. He actually managed John Rubin before John signed to Goatee. So, I mean, literally, they were down at GMA's, and he was on, you know, he was managing them. John was about to put out a record that was going to be extremely underground hip hop, not like, you know, the first Goatee record. It was so much different. And, you know, long story short, GMA week, they got Pigeon John, they got John Rubin doing a showcase. They got, Brainwash Projects was there. Everybody was there. And here's the guys from Goatee, you know, you got Toby, Joey, and Todd. They were all there, and they scooped up John like nobody's business. And, you know, they basically, my friend had to like weasel out of his contract. Mm-hmm. So there's like been a little bit bad blood, you know, they all like, you know, hate, you know, like they've always hated my friend, you know, for, you know, for that. But yet they're the ones that took him from him. So quite interesting. I mean, obviously, John's. I mean, going and seeing all those early shows. I mean, I've seen. We used to go see anytime John would perform, we'd go see him, and then he brought him in at different shows. He showed up at other small shows that we did just to like hang out in the crowds. DJ Manny would show up. I brought in DJ Maj,
Nice.
Pigeon John to the church one time, and Manny showed up, and John came, and even Nathan Smart. A lot of those guys, all from that Columbus crew. So we were all pretty. We like roundabout either knew them or like guys like Alon, we actually were friends with them, and they were cool guys. But John always was special to us. But I'll tell you, probably the coolest show that I ever saw was obviously any Pigeon show was great. All those shows were awesome. Toby Mac. I mean, he puts on an amazing show. But I will tell you, the one band and that was unreal. They were kind of unknown, but I knew who they were. And when they signed to Goatee Records, which was 4th Avenue Jones,
Nice.
They were playing the Alive Festival, and me and Liz, we were like in the front row for this, and this was on their beach stage, so it was a smaller stage, and like they're about to start in like 2 minutes, and like Ahmad is standing up there from 4th Ave, and there's like nobody there. And all of a sudden, like all the artists start to show up. Like Toby's in the background. Here comes KJ and John Micah on the go-kart. They're like driving up. I'm watching this, and I'm like, I could see all the artists start pulling in. And when the artists start pulling in, you best believe the crowd just like what's going on? And then like for the next like 45 minutes they're set, like I look back and there was like 500 or 600 people now like jammed this, like because they ran all these other stages, and the beach stage never got that, like, really ever got that big. And once all the artists came down to show their support for 4th Avenue Jones, I mean, it was really, really cool to see. Obviously, I mean, I could just tell story after story of how many amazing shows, but that one always will stick out because you never rarely see so much artist support.
Yeah.
And that one they were just, 4th Avenue Jones, if nobody ever got a chance to see those guys live, they were so skilled at everything they did.
I've never seen them live. Have you seen them, Johnny?
No, I've never seen them live.
No, I haven't. Seen
and it's
them.
only legendary status because they're never performing again live. They're never going to get back together, most likely, because the husband and wife divorced. So it is never going to happen.
The band
again.
you were telling me about like a few months back or something. You said you and Liz are just listening to tons of it. You got into it. What was that band?
Well, there was a band that we actually named our son after, and we saw them at the. Yeah, we saw them at not after them. We actually loved their name, so we took it. Which my son's name is Riley. So there's this band, and we brought him. We've actually brought him in, done stuff with them. Everybody may know them from the Lecrae Flame song, the Flame song
you know that one, Johnny?
Joyful Noise. That's the one where they sued Flame was able to sue Katy Perry for $1 million.
Yeah.
But who sings the hook on that song? And everybody's going to go look it up now. Is this guy, John Riley, from the band Riley, and he sings the hook to that song. I don't know if he got paid out, but maybe he did. I know Lecrae didn't take any of the money. But those guys, I will tell you, by far, they should be absolutely huge. Unfortunately, they're not. John's a youth pastor now.
Yeah.
They have a side.
How many albums do they have?
They have I think they have 3. They have 3 albums that they released.
Riley.
Yeah, they're just called Riley. Huh. Kind of hard to find online.
Have you heard of them, Johnny?
No, I haven't.
You check into that. What about you? Like, let's go into these hidden gems. Maybe pick an artist that you you would qualify like that, Johnny? That you're kind of like, many people don't know, but this is like, it's a hidden gem. Because I know Chris and I, we'd love that kind of stuff, and it can be any genre. It can just be, something that you, and it could be fairly well known too, but something just kind of offshoot,
Here's one, and I mean, it's not necessarily a hidden gem, but it is in some ways, because Aaron Sprinkle as a solo artist is incredible, and I think a lot of people sometimes just think of him either in, Fair or Poor Old Lou, or not Poor Old Lou, Pedro the Lion. That he was in, like, all the stuff that he was involved in as a producer and that, but his stuff, just him, is incredible.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Speaking of Poor Old Lou, let's kind of go into some of those. You remember like Plank Eye and Poor Old Lou, and like, let's go into the 90s, because I know there were some people actually in the chat before that were bringing up some of these artists, but maybe kind of go through kind of a blast from the past, some of these artists, that were around and then they were gone, but there were so many, I think, in the 90s that it was just exploding. Would you say that was kind of like kind of almost not the peak of the Christian music industry, but it was just exploding? When you say in the 90s, it was just so much stuff was coming out.
That's well, I don't know. Was it the 90s, or would you say the early zeros that it was?
Zeros,
because it seemed like it was just it would seem like it was just like the DC Talk Jars of Clay was kind of the start of, but it wasn't until after everybody released a worship album in 2000 that it seemed like Christian music really started to pick up.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. Looking at that, what would you say, Chris? Is Chris still with us? Did we lose Chris?
Maybe he got mad at us.
Why would he get mad at us? He's still there. Oh,
somehow I went on mute.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Somehow I went on mute.
I was like, I asked the question, everyone goes silent. Like, was that a stupid question?
Well, if you look, I mean, technically, if you do look back, like if you're looking at the alternative genre, when that really started to truly take off, that was definitely that height, of, when Tooth and Nail truly came onto the scene, and they definitely changed the game. One of my good friends, Alan Aguirre, he was influential in that alternative scene.
What was his
in
band
that chain.
Again? You mentioned
Scattered Few.
Scattered Few, that's right.
Yeah. So that whole punk scene, he was so instrumental in breaking down so many doors, and then the start of that Tooth and Nail, that movement. Now, obviously, it brought a lot of great music, but the spirituality, if in that movement, definitely took a hit, because Tooth and Nail eventually got to that point to where, Tooth and Nail, Solid State, all you needed to be was like one artist in the group needed to be Christian for you to sign to the label, right?
Yeah.
So that really watered down.
Yeah.
The discipleship, nobody cared about that. It was about making music, making money, getting girls, doing drugs. I could talk for hours on all those things, because tonight's positive night, right?
Sure, but I still want to talk. I want to still talk about the state of the music industry, just like we were talking, earlier today, Chris. I think it's important because things are changing. Johnny obviously being in the industry, but just seeing how, everything that he's been through, in the last 17 years, but, things are radically changing, especially with digital, the way people are consuming music. Like we talked about, all of us are used to having tapes or CDs, but it's funny, like my children will never know what it's like. You know what I mean? Like for the most part of what it's like going to buy a CD and just having that physical. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that because, I think some things are being lost based on the way technology is going.
No doubt. No doubt. The connection from the artist, whether it would be, we all knew it, whether it be secular music that we first started to enjoy or listen to, to then getting the Christian stuff, reading liner notes, reading the lyrics, not watching a video that has lyrics in a video, not streaming from Pandora and Spotify, listening to your local DJ to hear stories, to get interviews, to learn more about the bands, to be connected to something. Now it's just at their fingertips. They punch it in. They miss that. And like me and Robbie were talking. It becomes the loss of the album because everybody's focused on only producing singles. And if you do produce an album, it's only those big artists, like a Canadian guy, that you guys all know, which is Manifest.
Oh yeah.
He produces, most of his music, he hits, like he said, this is going to be my last album most likely, because he's going into the realm of just doing singles or doing, like 2 or 3 song, EPs type of things, and maybe eventually compiling them into an album. And he's one of the few guys independently doing it full time, and he has to be very strategic on how he does it, to sustain his business and his ministry all in one shot. So it's just totally destroying, the indie scene in a lot of cases. Now, a lot of cases it's good for the indie scene, but a lot of other realms, like the degradation of youth groups. A lot of people are leaving the church because of they're waking up to different doctrines and things like that, or people are only that are still in churches are only going to mega churches, and then they're not doing concerts and those small youth group shows. Those are all being lost. Instead of bringing in a band that was on tooth and nail like back in the day. Like, oh, hey, we got 100 kids, let's get a tooth and nail band, bring them in, that's cool. No, they have 200-300 youth group, people in their youth group, or 400 at these mega churches. They're like, no, let's bring in this really big band. And that's, that ends up killing, these that smaller scene. Why you don't see, Christian coffee houses, music clubs, why you don't see that, truly, I missed so much of that, by just living, apart from it, during that, the 90s in my youth, and didn't come to it till after high school. I missed all that, and I tried to make up for it, and I'd be the old guy, hanging out at these places, but
what do you think, Johnny? What do you think as far as like the new generation? Do you think they're like appreciating albums like we did?
No, they're spoiled. It's and I don't say that as a negative.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I was just thinking about, I wrote a letter to Skillet back in the A, how weird is it that I wrote a letter, and B, that it's not an email. But I remember getting a letter back from one of the members in Ken from Skillet, and he signed his name and said, thanks for listening to our music. Where now you have a Twitter or an Instagram, you right there have the access to every artist. And there's a lot of artists who are doing great things that they're like, hey, fans, what do you think? You vote on this, and this will be the next, So the access to them is so much greater, but you just don't understand, sitting around waiting to hit record on your radio because the brand new single from insert artist here was just released, where now you've heard the single 5 months ago when it was released, and now it's finally hitting radio.
And most of those artists that are on social media, which all of them are, aren't even the artists. It's their social media department.
Sure.
So, you don't even, you think you're hearing from this artist. You're really not.
You're not. No, you're not at all. But it was that
thanks for ruining that for me.
No, not all of them. Not all of them.
Johnny Rocket, he's got his own people that handle his account. He doesn't even handle his own Twitter. So.
Yeah, that's why it's my kids. That's why there's so many spelling mistakes.
It's my kids. It's like, get off the Twitter, get off the social media. Yeah, no, it is really changing. I don't know. I look at it, maybe it's just an age thing, but it's like the glory days, like even we were talking about before, Christian bookstores. The whole, it was such an adventure going there, and these walls upon walls upon walls of Christian music. Now, there's like nothing on the shelves. If there is even like Christian stores. I mean, what's now here in Edmonton, Johnny? How many are actually open? Fig Tree,
We have
West Edmonton
two.
Mall?
We have two.
Two.
Yeah.
Like I would say, what was it? 15 years ago, how many would we have?
Probably 10 to 15.
Yeah. So it's really, really sad. Like exactly, and I mean, everything's going digital, and yes, that's the way things are moving. And I mean, you can't stop it. But you think there's any benefits? Let's not be all negative. What are the benefits? Like Johnny brought up a good one, saying that you're so connected. That, I mean, you have access to these bands, and it's totally true. I remember reaching out to a couple bands, I'm like, and then instantly they wrote back, and I was like, wow, like that was instant. They wrote back to me personally. That goes a long way. What do you think, Chris? Is there any other pros based on the way things are now than they were?
We have to look at, this is the only pros that I can see, is that it's easier to find artists as a pro. Before that, finding the artist like a hunt, that was fun, Yeah. Now, granted, if we had everything at our fingertips back then, we would have absolutely loved that. I mean, we can't kid ourselves.
Yeah.
If we would have known back then, like, oh man, think of this artist. I mean, from the hip hop side, if we would actually known who guys like Braille were from, now he's on Humble Beast, but Braille was putting out some really good music as an independent artist, before he even stepped onto the scene. Like with Axe 29, like he did on Syntax Records, and then ultimately Lightheaded, if you guys are familiar with that. But we would, nowadays with him, putting out on the Humble Beast Records, if we would have known his early work, like we would know today, I mean, for crying out loud, those CDs of his early work. Because they were such rare gems, they sell for $100 to $125 online all day. Wow. If you could find one, But that would have been the pro. We could have found these artists before they were big. We would have found bands like Sanctus Real before they signed to Spiro Records and put out some of their music. I mean, first time I heard Sanctus Real, for example, was on the C Spot Rock Tour. John Rubin, Supertones, and then they had Reliant K, and then here's this band, Sanctus Real, opening act. But they were an indie band pumping out great music for so many years, but we didn't even know that. So that would have been the pro.
Okay.
That we would have been able to approach these artists much earlier than much later, and then by the time we found them as music collectors and want to get their CDs, we wouldn't have to be paying $25, $35 on eBay for them. We would have bought them from them directly, right, and gave them the money.
Have you noticed there's lots of Christian? Have you noticed many Christian artists or bands that you cannot find on streaming platforms like Spotify or Apple Music? I mean, I know there's a few out there, but I know in your search, have you found that? What about you, Johnny? I'm not sure if you've looked around, but I know, like, for example, like a lot of Grape Tree stuff, I don't think is even on, is it?
No.
Soul, their stuff doesn't exist. Online as far as like Apple Music or Spotify. What can you name any other ones, Johnny? Like, have you thought about some of these artists that were around, or even labels for that matter, and it's like they didn't get in time to actually make the digital transition?
Yeah, I'm the wrong person for that one, dude. I don't have a Spotify or anything like. I'm still so old school on things.
I know you're.
That
totally
I refuse. I refuse to do it.
I mean, I say kudos to those things because at least it keeps the collecting world at least
that's what I was gonna mention. That's what I was going to mention is there's that collecting element, and I mean, I think how like vinyl is making a big comeback. With audiophiles and all that type. I think CDs, they'll be that, in the future. People are like, whoa, what's this? I mean, if you go back in like tapes and like 8-tracks and, vinyl, when it comes to music or someone that really wants to collect, they will get in, they will want the physical thing. You know what I mean? But again, it will be more of a hobby than, general population is what they're looking at, right? But I don't know.
Yeah, I pick record stores all the time. And it was No, I'm not gonna. I'll say her music choice, but there was this young girl who came in. I think she said she was like 19 or 20. So she was born in 2000. She walks into the record store, and I'm sitting there, just like picking the CDs, and I overhear the conversation. And she's like really embarrassed. She's like, well, they're like, can we help you? She's like, well, yeah, I'm looking for some CDs, and then they're like, well, what band? And you could hear she was a little nervous because it's kind of like guilty pleasure music is what she's about to say out of her mouth. Mm-hmm. She's like, sure. I got back from being in Las Vegas with my family, and we went to see a show, and it was by the Backstreet Boys. And I am like a diehard fan now. I want everything. I want all their CDs. I want everything they ever put out. And in that moment, I'm like, you know what?
Sorry, which band was it?
Do I gotta say? I have to say it again twice? Okay.
Yeah, she wants it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
you said Backstreet. I know you said Backstreet. Yeah,
Backstreet Boys. Yeah. So that was so funny. But that showed that there's still a niche for people who want, the physical items, because you can just go to YouTube, you can go to Spotify, Pandora, and just, all their whole collections there. But she wanted the physical thing, and they told her, well, we have 4 albums, but they're all in the dollar section, which is not organized. And she's like, well, I'm gonna hunt for it, even if it takes me all day, I'll hunt for it. So that was reassuring to say, hey, real tangible world, because I'm going to be honest with you. This is like this attitude that we're seeing. It's the same attitude of, why everybody's on their phones all the time. The fast food lifestyle of, this fast paced, everybody wants it now, quick, easy, convenient, that world of putting in a CD and listening to it and sitting down and relaxing, and just enjoying the music and putting it in the car and just going for car rides, not going somewhere, just going on a car ride, right? Yeah. These are things we used to do, and now those are like, why would you do that? Why would you just get in the car and drive? Why would you just? Do people
like again? Is it an age thing though? I mean, are teens doing that still? I'm sure that they are. They just go for a drive just because.
Yeah, it was super I'm sure that's still there because you just put on Spotify and you drive. As long as you got good internet, you got your Spotify account will work. How about turning all that stuff off, just relaxing, spending some time, whether you're listening to music or not. I mean, for crying out loud, go somewhere and read your Bible or something, right? Don't just download the app, right?
Well, let's go pick opposite up the to relaxing. Let's go opposite to relaxing. Yeah. For you, Johnny, what's the hardest band that you loved? The hardest band, and then we'll go over.
Oh, dude, there's so many that I loved.
Well, just throw some. This is what we're doing. Just throw some hard bands. Hard, like I'm talking.
I mean, like, Blindside wasn't necessarily hard, but I remember them being on one of the Solid State records that I had. And Solid State had their sampler CD, and it was Blindside was one of them. And I mean, I loved Showbread was another one that came out, or Project 86, Zayo, Under Oath, Stretch Armstrong, Living Sacrifice. I mean, that was what I would listen to that, and CD number 1 and CD number 2 would be a hip hop compilation album.
Oh wow, nice. What about you, Chris? I don't know if Johnny just mentioned them all, but
yeah, I mean, I would say more older school stuff would hit. Definitely old school Striper. Bride, Deliverance. Groups like that. Because obviously that stuff may not have been super hard. Sure. Maybe some of the Guardian stuff wasn't super hard, but all just really good stuff. And then as you get a little bit harder, of course, that would have been, some of the.
What about like Mortification?
Mortification. I mean,
just kidding. I don't
they
know if
were
any
a
of you
little
guys
bit
know
too
that.
heavy for
They
me,
were
but
heavy. Yeah, they were heavy.
I have a lot of that available for
Dude,
sale.
I had a guy driving with me who was totally into death metal, and he actually told me that Mortification was the hardest death metal he'd ever heard out of all his secular bands. He said the drummer was just insane, but he actually told me that this stuff is harder than anything I have in the secular genre.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were really, really incredibly intense. So, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, there was a lot. I mean, yeah, all that Tooth and Nail, Solid State stuff, or even some of the other bands that maybe not were so hard, that were maybe a little rapcore. I always like those. Like Justified was a really good band.
Yeah.
Disciple. They were
Hey,
always
speaking of Tooth and Nail,
solid.
Starflyer was on Tooth and Nail, correct?
Correct.
How many albums? How many albums do they have? Because they're still pumping them out.
10 plus.
They
I
must.
can tell you that.
Like, it's unbelievable. Like, it seems like they would be up there. I mean, maybe not 27, but I just thought about it, but they must be up there because another one, Choir. Man, they put out a lot of albums, man. The Choir, it's got to be getting up there.
Yeah, yeah.
The Choir, honestly, they just released a new one here in 2020, I believe. But yeah, I'd like to look that up and see. But I was just trying to think of like bands more alternative style that have just kept pumping out, album after. That's one thing with the Choir. You don't see EPs with the Choir. You don't see singles with the Choir. They're full albums. I gotta respect that. I really do. Maybe I'm just old school, but there's something about an album versus an EP or a single. I mean, when we were at Take on the World, Chris, and I was talking to Becca Shea's husband. He like produces her. He mentioned that like he's got an entire album for her in the wings. And what they're doing is they'll do single. He goes, the way that the industry has shifted, this is going back to our discussion, artists have to basically get something that just hits on Spotify or streams or gets radio, and then they're ready for that album. But, all the costs and everything kind of producing it and stuff. But he mentioned that, no, because I said, she have a new album coming out, at this point. And he's like, really, we're kind of working on, singles and EPs. But I've noticed kind of a trend. Have you noticed that trend, Johnny? Like overall, like there's just been more kind of EPs and like single after single after single versus before, a single would come out, maybe a single and then the album. But it seems like, there's artists now, and I'm not talking the big artists. I'm just talking about artists that are wanting to do something. Somebody in the chat had actually mentioned before, Jay had mentioned, was there any advice from both of you on new Christian artists getting into the industry? Is there any advice you could give to them?
That's a loaded question.
Well, just kind of like based on the industry and what you see, like something kind of, to maybe help them or look at this or what they need to do. Like a lot of people just think, if I just put a good song together, I'm going to make it big. But I think there's a lot to do with who you know as well.
Yeah, I think, and I say this from every artist that I've ever talked to that wants to get a thing on the radio. Production is key. Sound and quality is key.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're a good artist, then the rest of it will fall in line. But if you're wanting to get on the radio, listen to an artist that's on it, and then see if your production and quality is the same as that artist.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think, Chris?
I mean, and it doesn't hurt to get credibility. And credibility, unfortunately, is pay somebody that does that production with a name. Drop a feature on that album. I mean, I managed and worked with. Back then it was a little easier to break in, and we didn't quite make it. But I'm going to tell a quick story here, so hopefully I don't get too winded. But there was an artist.
Right now we got to actually go
bonus
here at the
on
end
the
of
bonus
the discussion, but we're going to continue it on. But thanks so much for tuning in to Celebrate Truth Radio. Host tonight were Johnny Rocket and Chris Bailey. It was awesome going through the Christian music trivia night. It was brand new. It was a ton of fun. We're going to have to do it again. Really appreciate everyone standing by. Take care. We'll be back next week. Appreciate you all. And we're still going here on YouTube. It's the continuing after the show here, the special after show. Chris, continue on what you were saying there with the bonus.
Okay, so I managed an artist, and which I didn't know what I was doing, and he didn't know what he was doing. So we were just like kind of playing around, and like I supported him, and so I'd say manage, but I was like faux manager or whatnot. But but it was super cool, and he got as high as really being like a producer for some big artists, some pretty decent artists in the realm. And he was a Christian hip hop artist. And I'm going to give 2 quick stories in there. There was a Christian label that was started by Todd Collins. It was called Beat Mart Records. And Todd Collins is one of the founding members of Goatee Records with Toby Mac. And so Beat Mart, they put out some pretty good music. Jafia Life, Bobby Bishop. They had some big artists. In the 2000s. But they came out with this album called Best of the Submissions, and they ran a submission contest, and that was how people broke into the industry back then. And we thought, hey, we got this really good song, and the guy that I worked with, his name was Same Old Jake, and you can just Google it right now, you'll find that song, and it's called Stick Up. And you did an online voting, and you could vote once a day, and you'd get on this mixtape called Best of the Submissions, and that happened. And so that's really as far as Jake got, as an artist, is he got on the Best of the Submissions, and started, and then he started producing for some other artists, doing some stuff with some of the other underground hip hop labels. One that was started by Future Shock, one of the guys from Future Shock. They were a big band, hip hop band in the 90s, and but during that process, we became friends. Not only with like guys like he was friends with John and Alon and some of those guys that I mentioned before. And if you don't know who Alon was John Rubin's hype man. So if you ever saw John Rubin concert in the 1990s. The hype man, his name was Alon. He was a youth pastor. He had like 10 kids.
Sorry, hype man? Hype man?
Hype man. So he was his hype man. Yeah, his hype man. HYPE.
Yeah,
hype man.
Hype man.
Yep. And so that's who Alon was. And Alon had some records and stuff, right? But there was another guy that we had met, and they were a duo from Michigan, and they were called Union. They had Michael, who went by Michael, and then this other dude, his name was George, and he went by Sage Godson. And this group Union, Jake got close with, started doing lots of shows with, had him on his album. And so, for me, being the faux pas manager in the back, I got to meet these guys, hang out, got to go to their shows, meet them, get autographs signed, and they hang out with us. They were super cool. We were all just kind of like Christian young people thinking, oh, maybe somebody's going to make it, sort of out of this group. And, nobody ever really did. Well, here's this guy, Sage Godson. His name was George. And, Jake left the industry, started pursuing, rock music, went down that path. We kind of fell out of the loop, as friendship, as we aged and stuff like that started to pass. So, he wasn't friends with any of those guys, so I wasn't friends with any of those guys. And this guy started to break into the industry, unbeknownst to me. And now I'm super close with this guy. He's a super good friend of mine. He's a good friend of you too, Robbie. And this guy broke into the industry by doing whatever it took. And he went the route of doing what Alon did with John Rubin. He became the hype man for KJ52. And this is, of course, everybody knows if you follow Take on the World, if you followed Robbie before, if you've gone to his conference before, he performed for Robbie. That is George Moss, of course. And George Moss, that's how my connection to George Moss came, through KJ.
So you knew Jonah KJ before George?
I didn't know. No. I didn't know. I knew who KJ was, of course. So I was following KJ's career, and all of a sudden I'm showing up at shows, and I'm like, that's George Moss. That's George from Union. And then I'm like, and then I start following, and then I'm like, this is getting crazy. And me and Liz are sitting there going, that's the guy that we would do the shows in the basement one. I mean, we also at that time we were friends with there was another hip hop artist, and they became big here in Ohio too. They were called the Scribbling Idiots, and Kaz Meta was one of the guys early on, and he'd do some shows down in this little basement in Olmsted Falls, and then he became part of this mega hip hop crew that went on to sign with Elect Records, and they had like artists like Theory Hazard and some of these other big names that went on to just work with just about every artist that's out there, and he was signed to Humble Beast Records and stuff like that too. But so that's how I would say to break in the industry is find somebody, get mentored, and obviously, if you can get the discipleship aspect, because, funny enough, George is telling me a story. Maybe George doesn't want me to tell this story, but the biggest hip hop artist who's a Christian today is not Lecrae anymore.
Okay.
Lecrae's been passed by NF. NF is by far the biggest Christian who does hip hop music out there today. I mean, he's surpassed Lecrae. And I mean, him and Lecrae were probably neck and neck, and this year, NF just blew him out with his new album. Oh yeah. And NF is also from Michigan, and so I'm talking.
Is that interesting though? How Eminem, a white guy, blew everyone away, right? And now in the Christian hip hop, you've got NF blowing everyone else away. I just find that intriguing. How it's two white guys that really are surpassing them by far.
Yeah, and they're both from Michigan, right? That's crazy.
And they're both angry.
Yeah, and so they both had the same exact. They have similar stories. One chose the light, one chose the dark. Yeah. And so before NF, because his name is Nate. Before NF blew up and signed to a major deal, who was he calling? Well, he knew George was making it, going full time. George was probably the only guy doing full time hip hop music who came from that area, just because he was touring with KJ. He was on Winter Jam. He was on every major thing. I mean, George is so humble, but he's done so much in the industry.
Didn't he do the song on with what was it with Toby? I forget where he came in, and didn't you tell me he did
Newsboys? Yeah, he did.
Sorry, Newsboys.
Yeah, he rapped. Yeah, he's friends with Tate. So every time they do a show, George will, when they're close by, whether it be Michigan or someplace, right? Yeah. And Newsboys is doing a show. Tate will say, "George, you're rocking, the Jesus freak Toby Mac parts, saw a man with a big fat belly, right? He does that live in front of thousands of people. And that's George Moss, who comes and performs at my conference, who gave us basically the name of our conference. Of course he did. I mean, and
anyone just really quickly, do you think that they're going to be doing a reunion album? Yes or no? What do you think, Chris?
A DC Talk reunion album? They've already done lots of songs together.
I'm talking about a full album. One last for everyone.
Life is short. Toby's learning that even harder right now. Yeah. I would assume they'll do something.
What do you think? What do you think, Johnny?
Listen, if they have a big write-up about a big massive cruise, why can't they also release a full-length album?
Good point. No, seriously, it's
even if it's 10 songs. Even if it's 10
songs. It'd be amazing. It'd be incredible. I'm still hoping.
Jesus Freak remix.
A remix, yeah. It would be quite something. Anyways, continue on with your story real quick. So you're talking about George Moss. You're talking about
and so NF, I mean,
you're talking about NF.
Yeah, right before. Yeah, so who was calling George Moss and asking him, how do I break into the industry? How do I do this? And one of first, George told me, one of the first things that he told him was, obviously, get right with the Lord, right? That was the first thing. If you check yourself, if this isn't his calling, and he's like, hey, that's not what he wanted to hear. He wanted to hear all these other steps of what you do. Yeah. And George told him, no, this is how you do it. This is, if this is a calling from him, you go and serve him, and however he's going to lead. George does hip hop music because it's the catalyst to disciple others. George doesn't do music because he loves music. That's not, he loves people and he loves to disciple. Yeah. That's why, frankly, he's still, George hasn't released a full-length album in over 10 years.
He's supposed to this year. That's why I spoke with him. He said 2020, so I'm waiting for. Is he in Israel right now or something? Or he was going?
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen, if you go and check out Israel Collective documentary, they do a thing at the end, and he's dropping some truth in his verses, and they have some huge artists in that, and he was able to do another one coming up. I think Lecrae and all those other guys, Propaganda and all that are on it. So, and that's going to probably get released sometime next year.
Have either of you seen NF? Johnny, have you seen NF? Because he came.
I've seen him. Yeah.
How was
I've seen him. I've seen him a couple times. Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah.
It's and the crazy thing is though is that when I liked hip hop growing up, it wasn't the cool thing, and now my son can go to school. And he could say, hey, listen, let's listen to this guy, and be like, oh, you listen to NF? So do I. That's so amazing. That's so great. Yeah. And that he's been able to break down these walls of, Christian hip hop can be a cool thing now rather than it wasn't, 20, 25, 30 years ago.
Sure. No, like it's pretty much mainstream. I mean, that's what that hip hop evolution that we spoke about at the very beginning of the program on Netflix. I mean, it really showed how hip hop was just this kind of fringe thing, but literally hip hop now dominates not just the music industry, but culture. I mean, culture, fashion, so I think in the Christian world, I think, that's doing that as well, but it's unbelievable to see how strong it's become just overall, but that's definitely pretty wild.
Now it comes with a lot of negatives too. So
for sure,
it sure does. No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. But that's kind of breaking down those stereotypes, saying, you know what I mean? Christian hip hop, in a way, breaks down the fact that you've got to be, talking, negative, or you got to be swearing, or because I think secular hip hop really, was so rough, right? If you look at kind of how it kind of started. So I think anyone attaches it to Christian hip hop, but that's like a lot of people. They're saying, oh, it's an oxymoron to have Christian rock, even, Christian hip hop. I mean, these are a lot of people would take a strong stance against, and that's why we're having the show, is we're talking about just the ministry potential, but just also Christian music as a whole. Christian music itself can be good or bad. It's a medium. It's like television. There's bad stuff on television. There's good stuff on television.
Sure.
You got to.
And the one thing that I'll say, obviously this was 2019 was obviously a big year for Christian hip hop, because of one guy really, who came in, who may be somebody who we should just watch, just see, obviously I've already, and I've said my piece on it a bunch of times, so go back and listen to that. So
what do you think, Johnny? Actually, Johnny, what do you think about the whole Kanye thing? I'm just curious, just from your vantage point and like being in radio and stuff, like, how has that affected anything? Just seeing kind of the explosion with, him coming out and doing what he's doing.
I mean, I'll get the statistics wrong, but I had heard that more people had searched Bible stuff and Bible verses and Christian hip hop since Kanye came and started doing what Kanye's been doing. So if there's an opportunity for people to start seeking because of what he's doing, I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Yeah. I would tend to agree on that, right? There's just been so many reports of so many people searching and then coming across, so many good resources, or even artists.
Yeah, but I'll say this though, and this is like anything, but when you start to put somebody up on a pedestal, whether it's Kanye, whether it's your pastor, whoever else, that's when things, that's when we got to start looking at things and looking at our own heart. And saying, hey, listen, what is it that we're doing here?
Yeah.
But I've listened to the album. It's not really my thing.
Yeah.
But if there are people who are finding God through it or starting to ask the questions, then he's like
a billionaire. He's like a billionaire, and I listened to the album too. And there's a couple good tracks, and I can see it. But overall, I'm like, you've got like access to the greatest producers in the world, and all. That's what you put out as your big grand, I was a little let down. Again, there is some good music. I kind of understand that. But overall, Lecrae's had better albums.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Well, here's what it should do for Christian music, whether it's any genre whatsoever. There's been a push to be a musician who makes Christian music, a rock star, a rocker who makes Christian rock, or a Christian who makes rock music. There's been a push for a rapper who is a Christian, right? And Newsboy said it best, right? I'm not ashamed. If you're going to claim the name of Christ, whether you claim to be a Christian or a follower of the way or the Bible, whatever you deem or claim, whatever that artist may claim, don't be ashamed of it. Stop trying to be a mainstream artist. Go out there and preach him to a lost, dying world. Guys like Lecrae, who came in and they had this moniker like, 116, right? 116. We are unashamed.
Yeah.
But then they're not. But then they became ashamed, even though they.
So they took it off.
Well,
they took it off their website.
I mean, Kanye should have sent a wake-up call to him, going, "Look, this guy's just coming out." That's one thing I'll say about Kanye. Those lyrics are right in your face. Theologically, they're right there. Where Lecrae's albums, they were getting more watered down over time, right? But Kanye kind of showed, like, look, you can come out, you can completely praise the Lord, and multi-platinum.
Yeah, and that is where all of a sudden all these Christian hip hop artists weren't afraid to be Christian hip hop when all of a sudden when Kanye came out and said it was like no, if you're called to serve him, that's where you'll find that's where the wheat and the tares will definitely be separated. Those have been called to use music as their platform. They will have longevity in this. Those that have not been, I mean, that's what I've been around, all these artists that came in and, we got to be, meet a lot of them, bring them in for shows. It is, staggering how many of them have walked away from the faith, how many of them are full-blown atheists now. They got into this because it was an easy genre to get into, and that they're going to get weeded out because of that.
How many of like Tooth and Nails artists, if you were to actually go and sit down with each one of those bands over the years, how many would have strong connections? I think for
very
for a long
few.
time, exactly. I think again, it was an industry that was exploding. I think a lot of people, their motives were not right.
But if you ever listen to Brandon Ebel from Tooth and Nail, he also signed some bands that weren't Christian.
Yes.
So it's right. But I mean, we can go through Tooth and Nail bands. Some of them might not even have had the faith.
Yeah.
They were just signed with Tooth and Nail.
Oh yeah, I mean, Icon for Hire is a classic example. Signs the Tooth and Nail, and then they come out and go, in their after their departure of going, we were never a bleeping Christian band,
but how many kids and how many parents were happy that their kids were buying Christian music? They didn't care. Yeah. It was just like, this is safe, this is Christian, and this is awesome. I'm going to encourage it. I'm going to support it. My thing was, myself included, for the longest time until I started listening to lyrics, I'm like, wait a minute, this is kind of strange. Like, I'm just grabbing these artists because, wow, this is cool. They got this Christian genre. And then you'd be like, wait a minute, like, if you insert this word, it's like, who are they even talking about in this song, right? Like they were so, they got to that level. So I'm not saying that every artist needs to come out and be that way, but what defines Christian music?
Well, I mean, it comes back to, the heart of that artist is what is really the root of it. I mean, if you're making music that's art and you're a believer,
like a mute math. I mean, they take the ideas like, look, we have faith, but we're definitely not Christian artists. We're just making music.
But mute math, when they, who became a universalist, when they were putting out music as Earthsuit,
they're so good.
Yeah,
their message was much different, right? Their message was much different.
It was much different. Yeah.
And
Jesus riding on a white horse.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, they had. And that became that change. When the internet boom came, when more knowledge increased, more atheism came on the rise, more acceptance, more scientism was forced into people's faces to make decisions. You know what? And these people, you know what? Being around the industry for a long time, you know, knowing guys like good friends like, you know, Jeremiah Dirt, George Moss, you know, being friends with a guy who owned his own record label, being around a lot of these guys, discipleship was completely absent and missing in these guys' lives. Yeah. You know, so nobody was seeking to mentor them. They were young kids going on the road, making money, having people scream their names, and yet they had no grounding. You know, they weren't connected to, any proper teachings. Nobody, some artists, maybe had some things, but you look at the artists that are still out there making music from the 90s. You know, a lot of the guys in those bands, you look at like a band like Grandma Train, Pete Stewart, right? Pete Stewart is a full-blown atheist now, right? And you look at, you look at POD, and you look at, a lot of the, guys outside of Sonny from POD, and which that was the album cover, Robbie.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, of course. And
okay, here's a question: who of like this is interesting? The major crossovers, the ones that blew up like insane, right, from the '90s to current day. If you look at them, how strong, like Christians are they in the sense of like portraying their faith in their music? Like, yeah, if you actually look at it, you see all these bands that like really cross over and they get really big, right? And I'm not saying everyone, but can you name a lot that were really strong? Newsboys crossed over, but quickly exited out because it was almost like they were too strong and they just died. Take Me to Your Leader, but I think that was it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like that blew up. Jars of Clay was never crossed over ever again. It might have been on some soundtracks, but it never crossed over mainstream top 40, after their debut. I
would say, guys like, Matt Carney, who still puts out, glimpses of his faith in his music while he's, 100% signed to a major label and, puts out,
big. I'm talking about like a multi-platinum artist. I'm talking about like a big artist.
He's made it pretty big, I would say, but, obviously you'd be talking about Switchfoot, you'd be talking about POD.
Yep, POD.
Look, Sonny from POD, he's still, I believe, an honorary member of the Whosoevers. I don't think he does anything with them anymore. My friend, I know a lot of people who know Sonny, and they say his faith is still very strong. Now, the other guys in the band, that they would definitely be weaker, or absent, or completely gone. Like Marcos. Marcos has been he's come out from POD as atheist.
Yeah. What about the Fray? What about the Fray? They were classified a Christian band, and they had kind of mainstream. They crossed over almost.
Yeah, or like bands like One Republic. One Republic were a worship band, right?
Yeah.
Before they made it big. So all you can do is it goes back to their heart, right? That's such a tough thing,
Sure.
But King and Country has broken the mold this year. They broke the mold. They won a Grammy Country Song of the Year with Dolly Parton. God only knows. Look,
I have no idea who the person was behind. Of all people, hey, let's get Dolly Parton on a song. Like, it just seems so bizarre when I first saw it. I'm like, who in the right mind would have thought that up? You know what I mean? It was like, hey, I got an idea, guys. Let's get Dolly Parton to do a song with you.
Yeah, or even Timbaland. Timbaland did a remix with those guys.
One Republic, and also One Republic. He did the whole One Republic thing. But yeah, yeah. But they're blowing up pretty good. But have they crossed over? Are they on mainstream radio? No, they're not.
That song has definitely made it to mainstream radio.
Sure. They put Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
It doesn't count. That's like putting a song and get like if Michael Jackson was alive, get Michael Jackson to be on the song, and it's going to be huge in that industry.
But they proved that people people in the mainstream still want a spiritual song like that is still acceptable. Look, I can only imagine did the same thing, right? That one. That one crossed over. Sold lots of.
And then some. That's like, I think that's Johnny's favorite song. He loves that song. You love that song, don't you, Johnny?
Biggest Christian single of all time.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Biggest
Yeah,
single?
it is.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't ask that in the trivia, but I guess I should have. The biggest single of all time. It really is.
Yeah, but it's the heart of it's you could definitely see in a song like that wasn't produced for to be this mega millions dollar success.
Sure.
It was made to be heard.
Yeah.
It was made to, the spirit had to be behind that, because it's a song. I mean, we just used it in our funeral for my grandma, and because it's that song that lets us know one day we will be reunited with those that we have lost, right? And a song like that, brings that hope, that blessed hope that we have in Christ, that He will return for us. And a song like that wasn't this song to say, hey, well, how can we pump this out in a studio and have somebody ghostwrite it for somebody? It's not how that came about.
Yeah.
That came from a deep sorrow, right? And a song written for his father. And what an amazing story that was. And I think that's what it goes back to. All of it comes back to, are you serving Him with all that you have? Are you submitted with your heart, mind, and soul? So the answer to how do I break into the industry, that's it. How do we do any ministry? That's the answer. That's it. There is no other answer. He will open those doors. He will make those connections. George Moss is doing music today in front of a bunch of groups of people. He hasn't put out an album in 10 years, and they ask him to come in and do music.
Yeah.
Like, he's not doing trap music. He's not like doing all this stuff that the new kids are into. They're still saying, "Hey, we want you to come in and do this."
What are the kids into, anyways? That's another good question to move into. What are the
garbage,
kids into?
Man, garbage.
No, garbage. No, but seriously, what are the requests coming in from the younger generation? Like, what is where is the music trend? Obviously, you got like kind of a cookie cutter thing that's often talked about in the Christian music, but then again, you've got different areas and genres that start highlighting. Are you seeing kind of like an electronic kind of vibe happening? Like, what are you seeing as far as the transition of music?
Actually, one of the things that I've really noticed as of late is taking songs and doing a lot of remixes for them. Like you had mentioned, the trap and EDM sounds, where you're taking I could only imagine, and all of a sudden somebody puts a beat behind it and you're waiting for the drop or whatever else. You see a lot of things like that, or because of things like Apple computers and that, people are able to kind of remix their own songs. And so you've definitely seen a lot more of the younger generation getting into something like that.
And what are you seeing, Chris, as far as kind of where the music itself, will be kind of, in the next 10 years, like in the next decade or so? It always kind of does cycles, and I personally see it as getting more electronic right now. That's been going on for a little bit. Stuff just seems to be more electronic. But what would you say? There was the grunge era, and there was all these eras, but it seems like things are more 80s now. Like, it's almost like an 80s vibe to a lot of the music that's coming out now.
Yeah, what will end up happening is, because there's such a poor quality of let's say the production is good. It may sound sonically okay, from the beats, because the beats are always going to be, there's always a driving force behind the beats. But lyrically, we're talking about, especially in the Christian market, we're always a little bit behind the secular world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So when things start to catch on, look at hip hop, for example. It's nothing but lots of repetitiveness. It's lots of like this really weird flow that the kids all think is,
what are we talking about here? Because this is new to me.
Yeah,
what
right.
Are we talking about? Are we talking about mumble rap, or are we talking about something different?
Yeah, it's mumble rap with a beat, with a drop, with a trap, with all this stuff, this lifestyle. that they all want to attach and dress to, and wear their tight pants. I mean, look, it's not for me, right? And I'm sorry if I'm bashing anything.
That's
but
okay. It's what your son's going to probably be into as he gets older.
Yeah, but I'm just saying this. There will be a calling back to when songwriters become songwriters again, when people are actually, whatever genre it is. I mean, when you look at what a true songwriter is. I mean, we go back to Larry Norman, who is a true songwriter. You go back and look at, even look at Toby Mac and what he did. I mean, everybody makes fun of like some of that early stuff, but when you start looking at, go back and look at the DC Talk, who wrote this? You go, whoa. Yeah. Oh, by the way, let's go back to that trivia question that nobody got. Kevin Michael McKeon.
My sister did. She did. My sister got it.
Yeah, she Googled it.
Yeah,
no,
right?
I don't think she did actually. She said I was trying, it froze up or something. She actually texted me while we were talking.
But I mean, you look at some of these guys, or you look at like what a true MC is. Somebody who can actually write lyrics and not just like,
Who's one of your favorite MCs?
My favorite MC, like a true MC, like somebody. I mean, look, you got. I mean, look,
skill. Like
my top five. I'll give you my top five because I don't want to leave anybody out.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, top 5 MCs all time. I may have to add a couple people to it. You got Journey. You got Journey Big from LGP.
Nice.
Yeah, the LPG. Tunnel Rats. You got Soup the Chemist. You got Plato, Crumb. You got Manchild and Mars Hill. Jeremiah Dirt. Pigeon John. I already given you 6.
Nice. Wow.
Anybody else from Deep Space Five's LA Symphony? As some added extra people on there.
In there? What do you think, Johnny? Because it sounds like he's like going through the gamut
there. Cross Movements.
Yeah. Oh, Ambassador from Cross Movement. Yeah.
Hey, don't try to steal
T-Bone.
his. T-Bone, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
T-Bone's a good rapper.
Broken English.
T-Bone's a good rapper. He's not a great. I don't think he's the best lyricist, but he's a great rapper. He's a great rapper.
He's a great rapper.
Well, I mean, lyricist then, I mean, I think one of my number ones probably is Plato, just because, I mean, he was doing all of those hip-hop freestyles and was winning, and you would watch some of these videos, and they would be cursing up a storm, and he would be clean, and it was just amazing to watch him do it and still get a crowd behind him.
Is that on YouTube? Like, is there actually a clip of him?
Oh yeah,
I know that they're definitely.
I gotta watch one.
Yeah, of just those go. I mean, look. I mean, Plato. We've been blessed to bring in Plato for multiple shows, and he's been. I mean, he's like on my bucket list to bring in for a Take on the World. I want to tell him. I want to tell him like what the conference is about, and like be like, hey, I want, because he can write some pretty crazy
just
stuff.
Ask him about the moon, and you can gauge him from there.
Now I'm gonna. Hey, now Jeremiah Dirt was on his last album, and it's killer. I mean, when Dirt's part comes on, I'm just like, that's my friend right there, But it's super cool, and like. I'm like, I know both of these guys, but I mean, Plato by far, I think he's easily in top 10. I mean, Braille, he's also great.
We got Alex in the chat saying ill harmonics.
Ill harmonics.
Well, that was. I mean, that's anytime that you can.
Rob Blackwell's been in here through the chat. He's talking about T-Bone. He's got exclamation marks, but he was commenting before about the music industry and stuff as well. So as a musician,
I mean, look, Rob Blackwell, he was a part of Building 429, and obviously he wasn't there when they broke off and made it big, but I mean, I mean, he's one that could come in and talk hours and hours.
No diverbs.
No diverbs. That's funny.
Yes.
Hey, Verbs, Grits, those guys were great too, but I don't think they were the greatest MCs.
No. And fair enough. We're kind of branching off now. We're just talking about classics and good hip hop. But again, to be fair, we're talking about lyricists, as far as good MCs, not just about good rap or albums or songs. We're saying really skilled MCs.
The other one too, and I mean he's Andy Mineo is quite amazing. To be honest, I love seeing a person freestyle and to kind of go from there to just see what they come up with, and seeing some of the stuff that Andy's done. He was on some other podcasts and stuff where he's had a chance to do it. He's quite amazing.
Freestyle is KJ. I mean, every Friday.
KJ's
you ever watch
killer,
it?
yeah.
He does Freestyle Friday. He's been doing it for I don't know how many years, 3, 4, 5 years. Every Friday, he takes 3 topics and he does it. But he does it all spontaneous, live. He's actually pretty good. You know what I mean? Overall, I think it takes great skill to do freestyle. I mean, that has to be really tough to continue to do brand new stuff off the top of your head. And but there's nobody. And again, this is getting outside of Christian hip hop. But who do you think would be the most skilled? I mean, obviously, I think hands down in the secular industry, it's got to be Eminem, man. Like, he's just insane as far as freestyle, like incredibly talented in that end. So what about NF? Has anyone heard him rip off, like, as far as
I've never heard NF freestyle.
I don't think I've heard him freestyle.
Neither have I.
I don't think he freestyles. I don't think there's any footage of him freestyle.
I mean, I'll say this, and I'm gonna switch it because you guys are talking a little new. You're going Andy Mineo, NF. I love the guys from Social Club. I really do.
Yeah. Nice.
Those guys.
Yeah.
Now,
Marty and Fern.
Yeah, I got to meet both of them, and so if anybody knows my water bottle, I got like all the ode to like old school, Christian hip hop stuff on there, and I got my Ilharmonics, Marzil, Deep Space 5 stuff on it, and so I had Marty and Fern sign the bottle. We were just hanging out, and they were looking at the bottle. They're like, "Dude, you know about this?" They're like, "This is like what we like. This is like what we secretly want." And Marty's telling me, he goes, "I'm gonna do a song. You're gonna see it. It's gonna feature Plato and Manchild of Marzil, and when we get a chance to drop it, it's gonna be fresh." And they're like, and he told me, he's like, they're like dream wish, and I want to segue this. I'm gonna say this. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm still this. I want to ask you 2 questions, okay? After this, but they were like, we want to do a song with Reliant K too, and so they were pretty cool, because I mean, he grew up listening like Marty. You could tell he knew he's like the modern day Pigeon John to me, because he's like quirky, he's funny, not super deep, he's relatable, but yeah. So I wanted to ask you guys a couple questions. There is a very iconic, famous singer today who dated Matt Thiessen of Reliant K. Who is that iconic, let me even just say it, worldly superstar?
Katy Perry.
You nailed it. That's right. And that was as Katie Hudson, of course. And so she did backup vocals for POD. Yeah, she did. She was on David Letterman, and that was her first time on David Letterman doing the backup vocals for Goodbye.
Speaking of female artists, what would be your top female artist? Each of you, Johnny, what would be your top female artist of all time, if you can, or a few, if you need to do a few? Just curious.
I had a crush on LaRue back in the day.
LaRue.
Yeah.
I can't say.
I'm talking about a female Christian artist, and you say LaRue. Isn't that
like
a duo?
She was. Yeah, it was a brother-sister duo.
We're not talking about who you had a crush on.
It was the first thing I thought of.
Afterwards. We'll talk about that afterwards.
She was pretty cute. Yeah, she was pretty cute.
No. Okay, who did you have a crush on, Chris? Who did you have a crush on?
Who did I have a crush on? I didn't have a crush on anybody. I would say probably one of the bands that I thought was really, really great. Definitely was Barlow Girl. Got to see them a bunch of times. Liz really liked them. One of my friends had a crush on the girls from Barlow Girl.
This is crazy. We're getting into crushes on Christian female artists. Come on, Johnny, back to you. Christian female artists, top Christian female artists. Who are them? We always talk about bands and guys and hip hop. Let's talk about females. What's your top female solo artist?
Oh man!
Someone actually said in the chat right now. Matt says Cindy Morgan is his.
Cindy Martin.
Yeah, no, definitely not mine.
Hey, Beauty's an idea older. We're not talking about that anymore. Cindy Morgan.
All right, let me think about it. Give me a second.
It's funny when you get talking like trivia and you talk to guys or I was talking bands and hip hop, and then all of a sudden you're like, what about a female artist? And you're like, oh, like I'm sure you
because
enjoy,
there's but Robbie, those are like the those are the guilty pleasure.
Alex says Jackie Velasquez. Jackie actually has an incredible voice. She had a nice voice. So Alex was saying Jackie Velasquez. So,
yeah, but those are the guilty pleasure stuff that you don't really want to say out loud. You know what I mean?
It's just
like you actually listen to the album.
You can say it. I mean, there has to be some female artist you enjoyed.
I really
enjoy her voice.
I know that she's newer, not old school, but I really like Carrie Job.
Carrie Job, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's from the worship. She's from the church, isn't she? Like, is she from the worship band? I forget.
No, you're thinking of Brooke Fraser.
No, I know that's Hillsong, but I know Brooke Fraser, and she's got a really nice voice actually. And
I think I think Sarah Reeves is killing it right now.
Sarah Reeves.
Can I say Carrie Underwood? Does that count?
Yeah, is Carrie? Would you classify
for your
Carrie
crush?
Underwood Christian?
For your crush?
No, we're off the crush. We're off the crush thing. We're saying, who do you enjoy? Their style, their voice. I mean,
I like
guys. You guys can talk
Carrie
about
Underwood.
a billion artists, and then you say,
no,
hey,
I like Carrie Underwood.
You like Carrie Underwood? So that would be okay. Pamela's in the chat is saying, how about Amy Grant? But anyways, yeah, like as far as different views, I just find it funny when you're talking to guys, then you transition it to like, what about female bands? Who would be your favorite?
Well, is Super Chick considered a female band?
Sure.
Or they?
No,
I loved Super Chick was great back in the day.
I mean, they got chick in their title, so yeah, I think they'd be a
I know, but it was two girls and the rest were all guys.
They're all guys. I know, but let's just say they are because I mean they got girl. I mean, let's say anyone that has women singing in the band. How's that?
Look,
how many girl bands are there in Christian music? All Christian. There's not many. If you actually think about it, there's not many at all. I bet you couldn't get to 10. Try to count 10. Chris, 10. And
10
Christian bands?
10 Christian all-girl bands. Name 10.
All right, 10. All right, here we go. We got Barlow Girl.
Yep.
We got Point of Grace.
Yep.
Yeah.
We Super Chick don't count. We've got Sierra.
Okay.
We've got
Mary.
Yeah, that's a duo.
Someone said Sixpence, but that doesn't count because Sixpence got a guy in it. Anyways,
it's got a bunch of Mary wouldn't count because it's a duo, so it's not a group. So group is 3.
It's going to be a group. It can't be a solo artist. It's all women.
I mean, there's going to be a bunch of there'll probably be a bunch of gospel ones that we're probably missing, but
out of Eden, there were
out of Eden, of course.
Nice,
3 girls.
Nice.
The other one's Trinity 5-7.
Nice.
You've got.
If we get into R&B, we're gonna get quite a few of them.
Ooh. Hey, if we could, because it's Canada, Carried Away.
Nice, Carried Away. Yeah. Do you remember Carried Away, Chris, or no?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was but you know what? This is bringing me back to that other band that I bought that CD for Liz. That I talked about in the beginning of the show, and I totally botched it. Hold on.
Alex says Avalon. Sorry to interrupt. But Avalon, of course.
Avalon.
No,
Avalon is no. Avalon's got 2 guys in it.
Avalon doesn't count. Sorry, Alex, you got it wrong there. Sorry. Go ahead.
Come on, Alex.
No, I got this. Hold on. Let me think. Give me a second. My brain's got to work.
We already said Out of Eden, Alex. We already said Out of Eden.
Yeah, I already said Out of Eden. Here we go.
Come on, Alex.
We're at 7.
Aurora.
Nice.
That's the band.
Nice.
That's
what about
that's a good one.
Oh, there's 2 all-girl bands, and the girl ended up marrying the dude from All Things New. What were they called? I don't remember now. Because there was a couple of female bands like that, like the girl bands that were, like wanting to be like Spice Girls.
Oh yeah. And we've mentioned a bunch of those already. Like Aurora was one of those. Like they were kind of
One Girl Nation.
One Girl Nation.
Nice.
That's who it was.
Yeah.
One of the lead singers had married the dude from All Things New.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's she's got a lot of good songs too. I forget.
Yeah.
My point is there's not a lot, right? If you actually look at Christian music industry as far as bands, it's predominantly, But again, I mean, that might be true even of the secular industry if you think about it. Like, usually there's not a lot of all-girl bands for some reason, if you actually think about it, like ratio-wise, percentage-wise. Wouldn't that be true, or am I off on that?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Zoe Girl?
Zoe Girl,
Zoe
nice.
Girl?
Nice.
Nice one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're now at about 10.
Are we at 10?
I think we're at 10. I think we just got to 10.
There was that. I think there was that other band. So there was a UK band called Blush UK.
Yes, nice.
Yeah,
yes, I have.
Nice.
Nice.
And then there was.
You got the rarities in there.
Yeah. Oh, I love UK. Man, the UK.
Too. Yeah, they got some great
pumped
stuff.
out some really good stuff.
Hey, speaking of UK, did you ever get into the band with no name?
Well, yeah, that's Chip. Yeah, that's Chip K. Kendall.
Yeah.
Chip Kendall. Yeah, band with no name.
You ever listen to them, Johnny? The band with no name?
Nope.
Oh, dude,
no.
They're a trip. They're a total trip.
Yeah, the 4 Points is the one that like really made them famous, but that was like when they were already done, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the biggest UK. I mean, still, I mean, Elzay7. I think he's the Toby Mac of the UK, and yeah, he's pumping out. He's always pumped out super quality music. He's still doing it now, and yeah, he's awesome. So. He's got some good stuff.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting and stuff. As far as like fringy stuff, like what was more of your like fringy type of artist that you were into? Like people before the chat, I know we never got into that, but they were bringing up like all these different like artists and stuff. Like we were talking before about Poor Lou or like Plank Eye or like all that kind of era. What were some of those bands that you just kind of? I think for the average person, they'd be like, oh, maybe or maybe not, but. Who were some of the bands like that you were into?
Flyleaf.
Nice. Oh yeah, Flyleaf. Absolutely, yeah. They became pretty big as well too.
What about Creed?
Creed. That's a controversial one, right? Was Creed?
Well, that's what I'm like. Yeah. Or same thing with Evanescence then too. If we're gonna go with controversy.
Yeah, but you were talking before, like when we were getting into like Earthsuit, and again, not like a lot of people listening, they'd be like, "What? Who are these guys talking about?" What about like Luno Halo? Remember them?
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the artists that were like, wow, and they were like almost like one-hit wonders, and they were gone, or they moved and they transitioned. Do you know a bunch of artists like that you can kind of think of? Someone saying Plank Eye. Rob Blackwell's all excited that we said Plank Eye, but yeah, remember Plank Eye? They had quite a few CDs.
Plank Eye is amazing.
Yeah, Plank
Eye.
You
loved Plank Eye, didn't you? You loved. Were they one of your favorite, Johnny?
I mean, they're a great band. One of my, as morbid as it sounds, but "Goodbye" is going to be one of my funeral songs.
"Goodbye" will be one of your funeral songs.
Yeah.
Oh wow. And that's which album is that from?
Is that Relocation? I don't remember now.
Chris, do you know?
It might be on that one. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I sell so much tooth and nail stuff. So who
are the popular ones? Who are like? Actually, I want to ask you as a collector. What are some really rare ones? Like ones that people are like dying to find and they're hard to get.
Like I mean, like name a genre and I could tell you.
Sure, that's what I'm asking you first. Like, let's just go with I'm talking about like tooth and nail stuff. Like, what's really rare tooth and nail stuff?
Tooth and nail stuff. I mean, anything typically Starflyer. Some definitely Joy Electric vinyl is pretty hot.
Joy Electric,
that's always a good find. I would say any of that early '90s stuff, like we're talking like the really early stuff, like Wish for Eden, some of their early stuff. Anything like in those first few years before they sold to EMI is definitely like stuff like Stavesacre, all that kind of stuff is still like totally collectible. People want it. They will pay up for it. Like for example, I just had the first Plank Eye that wasn't on Tooth and Nail before they signed to Tooth and Nail. I found that was a really good find. That was on their original label, which was their own sort of label that they created, and that was the OG version of their first label or record. And so I was tempted to keep it. I'm like, oh man, the money goes to the conference, so all right, I'm gonna sell it. So that one sold for like 15, so it's not like huge bucks. I mean, really, where the money is at is definitely 80s metal is like super hot. I mean, and then 80s CCM rarities like there was like some of the bands I didn't even know, like Hope Sterling was a female artist back then. I sold that thing for $45, really quick. There was a band, Crimson metal band, Crimson Thorn, that sold for $265.
Wow.
It was beautiful. I have a couple really expensive ones, like some DOX that goes for about $120. And I've had offers for like 80 on them. So really, I mean, I've got some really good stuff left. But yeah, any of that, like Mad at the World, some of that early stuff sells really well. Idle Cure sells well.
Yeah, Idle Cure, classic.
And then like hip, if you look at hip hop, any of the like the SFC stuff, sells well.
Yeah.
Any of that stuff, I mean, to be super collectible, I mean, you're looking at anything 89 and earlier as like really valuable. And then as you start to get into the 90s, you start, it starts getting super mass produced.
Yeah.
So in the 90s, the things that are the most valuable are, maybe your cassettes as you get closer to 2000, because they started making them on very small pressing, or vinyl, because vinyl was just like more of a very niche thing. A lot of tooth and nail bands did that. Like the first Supertone Strikes Back, that vinyl goes for about $100.
How many ska bands? Actually, now that we're on to ska, maybe you can kind of mention a few of them. Johnny, do you recall a couple? Because that exploded, and there were quite a few bands that came out in that period when ska became really big in Christian music.
The W's.
The W's. There we go. Go back. We'll go back and forth. Chris, you name one.
Yeah. I mean, W's was definitely more like a swing.
That's fair.
Swing ska.
That's fair.
I mean, you said Five Iron right after that, right? When you looked at ska, I mean, you had Supertones and you had Five Iron Frenzy, which were at the top. Then all the other bands that were like sort of ska, that came in. Like there was, like PAX 217, which was like a rock hip hop ska. Oh man,
they're so good.
Yeah, they were awesome. And then like labels like Betty Rocket, they had a lot of like smaller like punk ska bands that came out during that era. Like Bunch of Believers, they were around, but I mean nobody could ever touch
to Mexico.
Yeah, I mean you could never touch, Five Iron and Supertones by far as being the most dominant, Christian ska bands of all time.
What label?
Supertones were Tooth and Nail.
It was Tooth and Nail. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Supertones were Tooth and Nail.
Five Iron Frenzy was Tooth and Nail as well?
No, 5 Minute Walk.
Oh, 5 Minute Walk. So we're talking about, okay, gotcha. Yeah. I heard that. It threw me off. That's right. Five Iron Frenzy.
There was a local band in Edmonton called Days of Wage, and they were the Canadian version of what Supertones was, and they're pretty good too.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Mojo was an amazing singer. He was amazing, stage presence. He also was a pretty solid MC too, because he definitely had his his MC skills that were super underrated. I mean, he had some awesome guests on their albums. I don't know if you guys remember. He had, obviously the biggest one. He had Toby on the album, but he had Gospel Gangstas on the album as well.
Yeah, I think I
So
remember
if you go back, you can hear, all that stuff.
Was Chase the Sun was that the first Supertones album, or was that their second?
No, that was
that was their third.
That was their third.
That was their
Gotcha.
third.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That's
they
the
had
one.
the Adventures of Supertones Strike Back, then Chase the Sun, then Loud and Clear, then I don't remember.
Wow, it's still pretty impressive, that's for sure. Yeah, that was it. Really blew up for. I mean, how long do you think that was in for? It wasn't very long though. Like it wasn't like it seemed like ska.
5 years.
Was it about 5? Yeah, I think it didn't even last a decade. I know that. But yeah, you guys remember the band? This is going off of that, but do you remember the band Church of Rhythm?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of bands. I'm thinking of bands that really kind of pulled a DC Talk, where they did like a Jesus Freak, where Church of Rhythm were going along as like an R&B kind of band, and then I think it was their third album. They totally changed everything. Do you remember that, Johnny?
I vaguely remember. I mean, I remember Church of Rhythm.
Yeah.
And I always got them and Rhythm and News confused.
I wasn't a big fan of Rhythm and News. I remember buying it, and I was just like, I was kind of into like that kind of music and stuff. It was one of the genres I liked, but I really didn't think that they were very talented and stuff like that. But I was really surprised. It just seemed like there was so much music coming out. I just remember I couldn't keep up with it. Pocketbook couldn't keep up with it as well too. There was just so much stuff, so it was unbelievable. As far we haven't really got into even R&B. Was there in that genre? Was there like artists of note for you, Chris? In the R&B genre? I'm not talking about black gospel. I'm not talking about
R&B. Yeah, I mean, if you go back in time, obviously, there was a couple that stood out. Tim Miner was like one of the very first.
Dude, the fact that you said that blows my mind, because I was actually going to bring this up, but that's my very first CD.
Yeah,
I mean, someone gave it to me because they didn't like that genre, and this is like before I was even Christian almost. It was like they literally had it to me. It was Tim Miner, and the name of the album was A True Story. But that's hilarious. You're going really old school there.
Yeah, and then of course, then that leads you right to John Gibson, and now hold on, trivia alert question. Here we go. What famous hip hop artist did John Gibson feature in one of his albums?
John Gibson featured in one of his albums, and it was a what artist?
A famous hip hop artist. I will tell you this. One of the most. No, I can't. I don't want to give it away.
Was it hip hop or rap artist?
Hip hop.
Was it more poppy rap, or was it like hip hop?
Fine, poppy rap.
I'm gonna say MC Hammer.
I'm gonna say you just Googled that.
I didn't. I'm a fan of John Gibson, but no, I didn't Google it.
Yeah, the song is called "The Wall."
Okay, Mr. Smart Pants.
MC Hammer.
Another one. What other big R&B group did MC Hammer star on? Actually, I'll give you even a better hint. It was two. It was a husband and wife duo, and MC Hammer starred on one of their songs.
Starred on one of their songs.
Yep.
Christian?
He actually raps. It's Christian. Oh, and they're big. I mean, as far as R&B, anybody in R&B would know who these two people are.
Well, yeah, it'd be the Winans.
Yeah. BB and CeCe. BB and CeCe.
Yeah. So, but what Christian rapper did MC Hammer get featured on? Grape Tree.
Wow.
Grape Tree.
Was it Grape Tree?
No. It's on a Grape Tree. It was on Grape Tree Records.
That's what I mean, right? So I'm going to say it's either Lil Rascal or New One. It would be one of the two. I'll say
No.
It was actually only
Prime Minister. There you go.
Prime Minister. Wow.
That's
Did you know that,
funny.
Johnny? I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that.
Bill, you can
say-
go Google the Sanctified slide featuring MC Hammer. There you go. That's your home.
I would say that
Sanctified.
literally Grapetree, out of their, I don't know, 20 albums, there was maybe 2 or 3 that were good.
They were the No Limit records of Christian music.
That they were.
Yeah, they were.
They're like the No Limits.
Yeah.
Well, it was like that was the time when you would listen to Mystical and all those guys, and they were trying to make their album covers look the same.
Yep.
And that's where you would have the featuring non-explicit lyrics, and you would have that on the front cover, just so that it looked so similar.
Yep. Yeah, they did the covers that way, and yeah, I'm always very suspicious of Grapetree, just their motives, the whole label itself. I don't know much about it. I haven't looked into it. Do you know anything about it? Either of you? Like, as far as like the founders and kind of what they were doing, it kind of seemed to me like they came out of nowhere. They pumped out just a ton of music, and then they were gone.
Well, they went bankrupt.
I know they went bankrupt. I know they went
yeah.
bankrupt, but it wasn't that. It just seemed like they were just pumping out these artists, and it seemed some of these artists seemed a little superficial, a little fake, in my opinion. I mean, I was just buying all of it. I didn't care because I'm like, oh, West Coast hip hop, cool. You know what I mean? I was really into West Coast, so I kind of like that sound, even though I was looking for an artist that was like real. There was actually one more. There was Lil Rascal. There was another one that was like was the guy with the really deep voice.
Yeah, but that's the misunderstanding about that is you're thinking of New Wine, but New Wine was not on.
No.
He was not on Grapetree at all.
No, not New Wine. Sorry. Who was the other artist on Grapetree? Really deep kind of voice.
I thought New Wine was on.
Wait a minute.
Grapetree.
No, he's saying no, it wasn't.
No. You're thinking of New Wine. You absolutely are.
Uh-huh.
But that's the misconception: is New Wine never dropped any of that. He was not a Grapetree artist. He was connected, and obviously, Little Rascal was part of that, and so he was on all of his stuff.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
But yeah, New Wine owned his own Wino Records, from the beginning, and then he was on Evander Holyfield's record label.
Oh yeah,
the real deal. So he was on Real Deal. Although everybody thinks there's this major connection to New Wine, and putting out all this stuff on Grapetree, which wasn't the case. It just looked like it was.
So did they kind of surface at the same time, like Grapetree Records for hip hop and then N Soul for like dance? Was it around the same time?
Yeah, it's about the same era. Yeah, I mean,
because N Soul pumped out a lot of stuff. I think the biggest hits they had were the whole worship ones. The worship. What am I talking about?
Nitro Praise.
Nitro Praises. The Nitro Praises. They were big. I remember they. I mean, I was in retail at the time. They sold pretty well, but like, other than that, who were really? I mean, there were so many artists on Soul, but I don't think there were really, other than Scott Blackwell, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was his label, obviously.
Yeah.
So I mean, nobody ever really truly emerged as being like a major star from N Soul. They always had, they were a very eclectic mix, right?
Yes,
they had a little bit of rock, a little bit of, electronic rock, maybe a little bit of hip hop rock, a little bit of hip hop techno, type of sound. But overall, they never, emerged like somebody who was, who went on to go and do like major things, sort of like, I mean, it was very similar to Plastic music, that Ronnie Martin started from Joy Electric, right? And, still none of those artists went on to be really big, but that genre never really produced, long lasting, I would say Joy Electric is by far, and Scott Blackwell are the two biggest names in that industry, and they both created their own labels.
Yeah, that's true. I would say out of all of that would probably be the ones that would be in there, right? You know who was kind of fairly big? Not like huge, but in dance they were pretty big. The Worldwide Message Tribe.
Yeah, I mean, then again, I mean, you're looking, you go back. I mean, UK. I mean, it's a UK band, right?
True. That is true. Good point.
Starts out right there, and then the other thing was by the time you got to the end, like LZ7. I don't know if you knew, was part of the very last groups of Worldwide Message Tribe.
No, I didn't.
So, he got his start there. He was background dancer, rapper, singer, all that on there. And so that's that. There you go. So
Hey, Johnny, real quick, do they still do like a chart like in radio, or do they have any type of resource where they'll say sounds like? And a lot of people were up in arms about that, but I loved it. Oh, why don't they have that? I mean, that was so awesome when you could be like, I like this band, fans of this band. I mean, I think that doesn't Jesus Freak Hideout, they still do that.
Oh, I haven't been on Jesus Freak Hideout since 2005.
Are you getting burned out with the music thing because you're always in like Christian radio? That's a whole other factor. It's like, do you get kind of like, is it more of a job to you?
No. I mean, I still listen to music. I find that I listen to music like it is work sometimes.
Yeah.
It's tough to just sit there and listen to a full album without.
Oh, trust me, I know. I'm still waiting for you to finish the album. I'm like, did you finish the album yet? You're like, no, not quite.
No. Yeah, I'm terrible for that. I'll start one and then I'll drive and I'll get into 3 songs or 4 songs and then I'm at to where I got to go. And then I got to start from the beginning again. So.
Yeah, because I mean, you got to like sometimes even pick music itself, like what you're going to put, on the station and stuff, right? So kind of like with that criteria, you just kind of know sometimes. I know there's some that are kind of like already in there, but again, when you're discovering new music and new bands, I mean, how does that go? That's kind of what you're saying is you're driving, you're always listening to music. That's kind of what your mindset is always. It's like, well, hey, would this work on radio?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, would this be good for the demographic, that type of thing?
Yeah,
so you got your
pretty bang on.
You got your work kind of music listening, and then you've got your personal. Which your personal, I guess that percentage with family and all that, it's probably small now. Like I'm just sitting.
No, it's funny though because I probably listen to all the artists that are on the radio station. I probably don't listen to when I'm in the car.
Correct.
With the family.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. I remember because last time you came over for dinner, your wife was telling us about how much you love to annoy her sometimes playing some, because she's not a huge fan of like, screamo.
Sufjan.
No, and screamo.
Yeah,
she's not a fan of screamo, and she's not a fan of, what was it again? Bollywood? Techno?
Oh yeah, she doesn't like a lot of the stuff that I play.
It's so funny. You just kind of put that on and just play it and stuff and just go and go and go. But it just seems like there's not a lot of room anymore for these. And that's the thing we were talking about before with Christian music. Like before, En Soul would come out. And sure enough, like for example, you remember Cloud to Ground, Chris?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay, but like a band like that, it was in the En Soul, it was going to be dance. If you like dance, you're going to listen to it. So again, and because it was on a label in Christian music, you could kind of discover new artists, even if you were kind of into like, EDM or whatever. At that point, it was like dance and techno and house and all that. But what I'm saying is nowadays, how does someone, other than just kind of playlists and looking through there, that part of it's kind of been lost. You know what I mean? Like how do you, other than discovering new artists, it seems like there doesn't seem like there's such a fan base around these artists like there were when we were listening to this music. Do you think it's the same way, or am I wrong on that? Like as far as the way people are listening to music today in Christian circles?
I would say from what I see, obviously, the big names are still going to be your big names. And then, the young kids, what they're looking for is how they find their music isn't from the radio stations, no offense. It's not from, any of the traditional methods. It's all YouTube driven. That's how they're finding these artists. And so, they'll connect with those that sound like what they want it to sound like, like the modern artists. So, and then they get connected to them. And you definitely see that, some of the, that's, these people do get, some of them get big followings. There's a blog that on YouTube that I'll follow, to create mixes, and I'll always try to look for, more, newer underground, artist, and it's called the Good Christian Music.
Blog? Yeah.
Yeah. And they pump out some really good stuff sometimes, and that's how people, that's how these young people are finding stuff through measures like that.
So if I went to a Christian that's really into Christian music right now, and I said, and I'm going to ask you guys this, or I'll ask you, Chris, first, is name someone in the last 2 years that would be classified Christian dance music? What band could you mention? Christian dance, like I'm talking dance. Don't just say because they have a little bit of a beat. I'm talking that would be considered like house.
Yeah, I mean that's a dead. Band. I mean it's kind of a dead genre, like house would be. I mean, it's all
But
evolved.
it's not a dead genre because in the secular, I know. But what I'm saying is,
I mean, if you're talking about EDM, if you're talking about how it's evolved to
EDM. Name a band though. Like that.
Capital Kings for sure.
Capital Kings.
Sure. Yeah. Name 5 though.
No, you can't.
So my point is this, though. My point is that they have to exist out there somewhere. It's like they're not being discovered because
they don't need to. Huh? They don't need to exist because every artist, no matter if you're a worship band today, no matter if you're, any of them, every single artist now uses EDM as a whether it be a remix. Or whether it be just their basic songs, because, I mean, you can look at it. I mean, everyone, go look at King and Country. Yep, they got EDM stuff. Toby Mac, EDM stuff.
Sure.
Those artists don't need to exist. I mean, the other biggest EDM artist, like who is like putting out music and production. I mean, you got Matthew Parker, who's putting out some really good music.
Yeah.
But you don't need that main EDM guy because they've already infected every aspect of all the artists. I mean, it's all that genre is alive and well in Christian music.
I see what you're saying.
Even without a major. Yeah, I mean, every lead single probably will end up getting a EDM remake, or it's going to have already a splash of EDM in it.
Well, fair enough. But so wrapping the show up, I want to kind of get into this though for each of you is who do you think there's some bands or artists to be on the lookout for here in the next 2 to 5 years? Up and coming ones. Obviously, having your pulse on obviously the music from the past. Let's get more current now, and even into what do you see in the future as far as ones that will probably make some calls if you need to. But I think I every time I talk to you, Johnny, we always have this discussion, or Chris. But who do you think some people to kind of look out for? And again, they can't be already massive right now. So like for King and Country, you can't really say. I agree, they're going to be like massive for sure. They're already massive. But who are some of the ones that are up and coming? In your search, Chris, you kind of do a lot of research and look into and listen to these things like you mentioned on YouTube. Who are kind of those ones that you're excited about that are kind of up and coming that are going to make a name for themselves in the next few years? You can go first, Johnny, if you want.
I think one of the things that you're going to see, and Elevation Rhythm is kind of what it's doing, or Hillsong Young and Free. You're going to see a lot of churches have these younger youth groups that are coming out that are doing these new sounds, which will be probably the next big thing. Like Hillsong Young and Free, which has become quite big. Mm-hmm. Elevation Rhythm, which from Elevation Church is big.
Yeah.
There's another young group called the Young Escape.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Yeah, you told me about that. That's
and
right.
I think they're all brothers and sisters, and I think there's about 4 of them. So I think that's kind of maybe the next big thing that you're going to see is these churches that are starting to push out a lot of these different sounds and different forms of modern worship, which I could see kind of being the next big thing.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that will probably be what does occur and what does happen. I mean, a band like the Young Escape, for example, they don't even have an album out. Everything they release is a single.
Elevation, and what was the other one that you mentioned there, Johnny? Sorry.
Elevation Rhythm.
They don't have an album either. All they have is singles.
Yeah. And, so obviously that's the realm, that's the thing. I mean, if you're talking about who's going to be the, how I kind of view, Christian artists like in their rankings, you have your headliners at festivals.
Sure.
Can you headline a festival, right?
Yeah.
And so who's going to be that next artist to do that? I mean, all it takes is, some of these big artists right now who are already sort of like teetering. They've maybe been out for a few years. all it takes is that one or two major hits that pushes them over the top. And so, there's no need to look to something new because there's nothing new under the sun. So, when we look at, how, these, like Switchfoot, they're plugging along, they're opening, they work themselves to open the main stage at a festival to then closing the festival out a few years later and then doing major tours, right? It took, I was meant to live, meant to live. That's what it took for them to do that. Then the rest of their songs are like, man, this band is amazing. Well, they're just playing the same songs that were just released on another album, but you didn't think that they were good enough before. Now they're all of a sudden major singles on radio airplay. If you go back and look at their first record, their next big single was the single that was on their previous album. So it takes like a artist like a Jordan Feliz artist to come up with one major song that just cross-sends everything. All of a sudden, that will be the next headline closer, right? You saw King and Country, when they broke out, all of a sudden now they're going to be headlining for the rest of their lives, right? They're Toby Mac status. You watch a guy like Lecrae, go to not being at these festivals to barely getting a spot to then being a headline closer, right, in a totally obscure genre. I mean, he became the first Christian hip-hop artist to be a closer at festivals. That's unheard of. That doesn't happen.
That's true.
That's kind of where I see. I mean, obviously I'm not looking for some new genre, some new thing to overtake and who's going to be that next thing. It's whoever has their either two things. One, if God's going to bless that artist, that they've got a message that the world needs to hear. Maybe that's what's happening with King and Country. Or they have an amazing writing team that spends a bunch of hours trying to pump out hits, and it's just an industry. Because you got the Christian music world comes down to two things: a business first and a ministry second.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's
well,
the
you
name.
nailed it too. You said business, and remember, these are industries. I mean, there's a lot to do with who you know. I mean, I know that those boys are really super talented, but the question is, if they were not at all attached whatsoever to Rebecca or her connections, because wasn't she Forefront?
She was.
Yeah.
She was Forefront. Okay. All I know is this: you're connected to Forefront or a Sparrow, right? And you've got an in. They're pretty much going to make you a hit. Like, that's the one thing I was going to say before. Don't you find it interesting how, for example, Sparrow or Forefront or these bigger labels, for some reason, did they have a secret formula? They just knew that they could just pump out artists, and they almost always did well. They had very few flops. If you actually look at their discography or whatever. But to me, I always look at it like sometimes there's, it is an industry, it is a business, and there are connections, right, in the Christian music industry.
But you got to also remember the Christian music purchaser, and I'm not saying anything mean or negative, but overall and you've already said a few times in this, so I'm going to go back to that. Sure. They are dumb and uneducated and are willing to support. So when you have somebody who is not up on the latest, meaning that they're a little dumb in this area, doesn't mean they're dumb people, just means that they're dumb in this area or ignorant, but they're willing to support because they want to support, things that are of God, right? Mm-hmm. Grape Tree came out with a record. You're like, I don't even know anything about it, but I'm going to go support it, right?
Because you want it to get bigger. You want it to get bigger, right? So you want to support it to make it bigger, especially if your heart's in it like that. Yeah.
Right, and you create cookie cutters. Great example of this, and I'm not putting down this band, but a great example of what cookie cutting in this industry looks like is a band like Cutlass, okay? Cutlass comes out. If you go listen to their first record that came out on Tooth and Nail, self-titled, it is hard rock, and they were extremely popular. And then you start to watch their career afterwards. Now they're just a full-blown worship band. Yeah. Now I'm not saying they didn't, that's not where, maybe that's where, Yahweh was leading them and taking them down that road. I'm not going to say that that's not what it was.
Yeah.
But what you can see is, no, you come in and say, hey, you take out some of that rock, you take out some of those things. No, we're not going to push you towards young people anymore. We're going to push you towards the 30s, the 40s, the 50s,
sure. Yeah.
the 60s, and you're gonna sell a lot. You're gonna sell all these albums.
Yeah.
And you can see that's what's taking place is, fit the mold, come in, fit the mold. I mean, look, Royal Taylor was an awesome band.
Oh yeah.
Torrin Wells comes out with Hills and Valleys, and he's a superstar.
Yeah.
That's all that it takes. That's all that it takes. Yeah. And that takes him from going, hey, I mean, that dude's as talented as Michael Jackson. And he's like talented. He's like the Christian Michael Jackson, right? I mean, if you watch him perform,
I wouldn't go that far. That's a little bit loopy, but yes, I agree with you. He's pretty talented.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen him perform live, you go, this dude can dance, he can sing, and he's got that kind of that it factor, but I mean, look, I mean, they get pushed down a road. I mean, if you look at, even Toby, when Toby, when he wrote the write-up for, Paul Wright's album, he goes, Paul Wright makes the music that I wish I would be able to make. Like some of these guys are stuck. Like, no, could Toby do anything he really wanted? You know what? I mean, he's owned by Forefront. If he wanted to do a straight up like super hip hop track or a little harder of a track, no, you got to dumb it down. And you're like, no, Toby, you can add the flavors of that stuff, but you got to be palatable to not only the kids but the parents. And if you're palatable to the parents and the kids at the same time, you're going to sell to both markets.
Yeah.
They're genius in doing that. Yeah. Now, you think that's what, I mean, Toby's already admitted, no, I would have loved to have done this. I would have loved to have done that. No, he maybe didn't get the chance or you get handcuffed to do certain things. I mean, you look at all the people who have left the industry because they're forced to do things that they weren't, they didn't want to do. I mean, it is an industry. It is, trying to fit a business mold. And, I think the next some of the next artists that will break out will be the one, because the independent scene is such on the rise.
Yeah.
And that's the really good part about the industry now, is that artists get to make the music that they've been called or feel led to make.
Yeah.
And then when the industry has to take note to these people, and then they have to push that art on the world, that the world are, especially the Christian world or others, that's what's going to really, bring back some of that songwriting ability, just good art, not something that's just cookie cutter and just pumped out to the masses, because we all know those bands, and we all know, created bands or whatever.
Yeah. And
they don't last. They're just, fluff. And I think that will be a good thing, and that's my really long-winded answer to your question.
It's all good, man. I'm still saying keep an eye out on for Apollo LTD. I just have a feeling about those guys. Super talented, kind of like you said, when it came to Capital Kings. Like, I think it's just two guys. But I'll tell you, man. Like, even when Becca's husband, listened to it, he and he's a producer, and he knows good stuff, and he was just like, yeah, like it's a phenomenal stuff, right? So I don't know. I have a feeling just to keep an eye on them.
If they make it big, they won't make it big in the Christian world.
No, and I agree. That's what I'm saying, though. Is I just have a sneaking suspicion that they're probably going to go that route where they're just going to do songs where you're kind of like listening and you're like, who are they talking about? They're talking about their girlfriend, or they're talking about I think they'll go that route just because I just think that they've got that like you said, it factor. as a band, and like you mentioned, other other ones. But yeah, it's hard to predict. But I mean, being in radio right now, like Johnny, it's like when you're listening to it, what artists right now that are fairly new in the last year to two are really blowing up right now, are really popular.
I think it is. It is no. I think it is those ones that we were saying, the church ones that are now starting to come out in that.
But really, it's those ones that you're actually like getting requests for, and like people are actually saying, play more of this, play more of that.
Yeah.
Really?
Definitely, because it's parents who are like, okay, I see that this is where this is going, and then it's them also saying, oh, this is what my kids are into.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, Robbie, we're in this community where, we're not from Johnny's, world, you're not from anymore, right? But so we all have this like. We hear Hillsong, right? And we're like, all this false teaching or that teaching or this thing, right? All these things,
from a doctrinal
right?
standpoint.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have.
Yeah,
I could have a heyday with Gungor. Okay, I could go to town on Gungor. Like, what the heck is that?
Well, Gungor's not even.
I would listen to
Hillsong.
Right? I would listen to Hillsong while I'm sleeping for 24 hours straight before get into Gungor. Man, that guy's messed up.
Well, yeah, but he's not. I mean, he's definitely not even.
Yeah, my point is, the show was more about just Christian music.
Yeah.
The good. We could definitely, go into doctrinal things and issues and stuff. But talented, Hillsong.
Well, my point was, I mean, like Hillsong, Young and Free. I mean, they have some. They are catchy.
They're a great band. They've got some really good stuff.
They're
really
good
stuff. They're really good. A lot of potential there.
They're made. Now you got that's the one thing that we all have to know that they are made. That is like making the band. Like all those TV shows, like making the band. That's all that is. I mean, Brooke Fraser came out and told you.
Yep.
This is all that this is, right? I mean, that's all Hillsong is. It's next man up. If somebody walks up, next man in, next woman in, right? That's what this is.
Yep.
And so I mean, they got millions of dollars to produce and make sure this stuff is top notch. And I mean, Hillsong, Young and Free. I mean, they are crushing it. I mean, their new song. I mean, that came on in the playlist the other day, and I was like, man, who is this song?
Yeah.
I think it's called Best Friends or something. And I was like,
yeah.
And this is like really good. I'm like, this is really good. I'm like, of course, it's Hillsong.
I would say that
again,
about
right?
Hillsong. As far as artists, as far as just talent, forget doctrinal, forget even the songs themselves. The talent alone, just in Hillsong, like the musicians. Like if you actually get into their documentaries and you see like the percussionist or the drummer, and like you understand his brain and how they're putting together stuff, they're very, very high level musicians. Like they're really upper echelon musicians. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Just watch one of their live shows and forget the song. Just listen. Look at the bass player. Look at the guitarist. Look at the drummer. When you see that and you understand the caliber of what you're dealing with, so they're just doing that. I mean, they've done quite a few different. I mean, they have Hillsong Worship, Hillsong United, Hillsong London, Hillsong Young and Free now. But yeah, like Johnny said, it seems like that's kind of a trend now.
They solidified themselves as like a player that's never going away. Once once Oceans dropped, it was like this is the movement, like right here, church worship bands. That's the movement.
Which is cool. If you actually think about it, I would rather a progression towards more lyrics to that level than getting to a point where like, what are they talking about? Like there were some bands that you'd listen to or you'd listen on like a radio and you'd be like, what are they even talking about? At least they're going more directed that way. So to me, it's always a good thing when it's getting more worship focused, especially with people that are requesting, and that's kind of the music. I remember a time when it was like worship music, right? And I always told people Christian music, that the ultimate progression of Christian music is you might start off, you get into it at the beginning and you're like, oh, cool, because I like this genre. But the ultimate progression of music in general, what was music designed for, right? It was designed for worship him, right? So really, the ultimate level is getting to that point anyways, is, ultimate worship, right? So it's pretty cool to see that happening with the youth, right? Because church membership's dropping like I mean, there's lots of articles coming up. I mean, it's dismal right now. What they're seeing as far as the figures, and they'll say, oh, it's growing here or there. I mean, have you looked into that lately though, Johnny? It's getting outside of music itself. Just I've been reading a lot of articles even lately. Just the churches themselves. Have you been reading that it's been growing or dying in North America as far as the youth, the Generation Z?
It actually really depends on the article that you read, to be honest, because some are saying that people are stepping away from the church, that nobody wants it anymore, but then there's other people saying that, it's the older generation that's walking away, but it's the younger generation that is seeking for something, seeking for some kind of truth.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on the article and who's writing it as to where we actually are with regards to that.
Yeah, I guess it would almost have to, help us do a survey as far as looking at junior high or whatever, just to see what those levels were comparative to, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like, to me, it's like, is the youth, and I'm talking the younger generations, does it seem like there's a progression that way or the other way? Either way, I mean, it always kind of, it cycles, but I'm just curious to know. And you're right. I mean, it would depend on what article you're reading. Right? And then you could get the same thing even on Christian music itself. But I was just curious overall. It just seems like a lot of these, like you said, bands that are coming out right now that are really big, they're catered towards more of a youth demographic.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting because, for example, like the radio station, that you're with, that I used to work at, I mean, it's more of an older demographic, is it not? Like, I'm not saying that, what would you say the prime age is for that demographic?
35 to 40.
See? So, but again, all this music that's coming out, like you said, you're right, because of the kids, and this is what the kids are listening to. But it's interesting to see that kind of, where before, 10 years ago, it would be more, contemporary in the sense that it would be the contemporary artists. It seems now it's getting more Remember, I used to always complain that, you'd have to have more youthful, like, music and stuff. But it seems like that's happening naturally, There's more of that music that's kind of entering the airwaves from a 30 to 45, demographic. That's interesting because I don't think that happened, 10 years ago.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, so that's interesting to see what's happening with Christian music. But it's totally fun, man. It's been an amazing show. We've gone, over 3 hours. It's another, I think it might be a record show. Yeah, actually 3.5. We've done 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours. We did it.
Yeah.
I think this might be the record actually, because that one time we did that after show. With Nate, Chris, do you remember? I think you were around.
Yeah. That was, I think, with Controversy 7.
That's
you guys.
Right. And we went, and I think we went 3.5. So let's stay on for 10 more minutes, and we have literally we've done the record. Well, we'll close it out. But right now, I think that we've hit the. Actually, no, we've already hit it because we talked another half hour after the show. The show was 3 hours, and then we talked another half hour. So we've actually hit the record here on Celebrate Truth Radio. Everyone that's tuned in right now, this is history in the making. We're history makers.
Could I do something before we close?
You definitely can.
Okay, let's just take a minute. It'll take like 2 minutes.
That's fine. We have 10.
Okay, all right. Here we go. I mean, if Johnny's cool with it, everybody's cool with it. I would say, you know what, where Christian music needs to go to, needs to get back to, back to the heart, right? But, for music, just talking about the music, needs to get back to good songwriting, good lyrics, deep lyrics, something that's impactful. So I'll end what I'll say, and I don't have to say nothing else if you let me read all the lyrics to this song.
Sure.
Fair enough?
Sure.
Okay.
And you know what? I can almost guess right now what artist you're going to be reading the lyrics from.
I know, right? Here we go.
Genius.
Yeah, here we go. I could say it at the end. Here we go. I was born and raised an orphan in a land that once was free, in a land that poured its love out on the moon. And I grew up in the shadows of your silos filled with grain, but you never helped to fill my empty spoon. And when I was 10, you murdered law with courtroom politics, and you learned to make a lie sound just like truth. But I know you better now, and I don't fall for all your tricks. And you've lost the one advantage of my youth. You killed a black man at midnight just for talking to your daughter. Then you make his wife your mistress and you leave her without water. And the sheet you wear upon your face is the sheet your children sleep on. And at every meal you say a prayer you don't believe, but still you keep on. And your money says, in God we trust, but it's against the law to pray in school. You say we beat the Russians to the moon, and I say you starve your children to do it. You are far across the ocean, but the war is not your own. And while you're winning theirs, you're going to lose the one at home. Do you really think the only way to bring about the peace is to sacrifice your children and kill all your enemies? The politicians all make speeches while the newsmen all take note, and they exaggerate the issues as they shove them down our throats. Is it really up to them whether this country sinks or floats? Well, I wonder who will lead us if none of us would vote. Well, my phone is tapped and my lips are chapped from whispering through the fence. You know every move I make, or is that just coincidence? Well, you try to make my way of life a little less like jail if I promise to make tapes and slides and send them through the mail. And your money says, in God we trust, but it's against the law to pray in school. You say we beat the Russians to the moon, and I say you starved your children to do it. You say all men are equal, all men are brothers. Then why are the rich more equal than others? Don't ask me for the answer. I've only got one. That a man leaves his darkness when he follows the sun.
The sun.
Yeah. So you obviously know that song, eh, Johnny?
Larry Norman.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean, trivia of the night. Yep.
I mean that that getting back to songwriting, that was written in 1972, and every single one of those words is happening and applying today. Yet no Christian would have the guts to do that today, except for Kevin Max. He did. Oh yeah, he just did record this. He just did record that song and just released it. But
speaking of which, he's got a couple albums out there now. He just keeps pumping them out. Like every year, it seems like he's got a new album coming out. Every couple of years, at least.
And they're all EDM. So
are they all EDM now?
They're pretty much
his new stuff. Yeah, he's gone all over the place. Like over the years, he's done all sorts of different stuff. Eh? He's definitely the artistic one of the three.
Yeah.
The poetic guy, wouldn't you say? They all got different personalities, but he's been an interesting guy, that's for sure. There's no doubt about it. No, it's amazing. What about you, Johnny? Anything to close on about everything we talked about?
I think that was pretty good. Good stamp on the night.
Good stamp on the night, man. It was a blast. It was fun. Like I said, there's so much going on, and I think you both have proved how well you know your Christian music inside and out. That's for sure. It's unbelievable if you actually think exactly how many artists and bands, and there's actually quite a few, as Chris will attest. I mean, collecting and having over 4,000 CDs. My question to you, Chris, is of the 4,000 CDs that you currently have in your possession, I think 4,500, how many or what percentage have you actually listened to the entire album? Because this is the reason I'm going to tell you. This is a fun thing to do.
Maybe 1,500 over all the years.
Okay, so here's what I suggest to do, because you can actually do this, and you can do this as well if you want to. Because one thing about music is, over time, as new music's always coming out, a lot of these like real gems get lost in the mix, right? So what you need to do is you need to put on like a playlist and have it playing, and just have it go through and shuffle your entire playlist. If you get your entire list, play the whole thing. I try to do it like every 5 years. I'll try to do it. It usually takes about 3 to 4 days round the clock. You just kind of put it on, and it's you hear a lot of music you haven't heard in years. That's the one thing I'm disappointed with when it comes to music, is over time you really forget a lot of really good artists. You know what I mean?
I did say I would totally, since we're doing this show, and this is just a snapshot show, because obviously we could do this for like the next 15 hours and never scrape the scratch. But getting back to good songwriting, of course, from the musical standpoint, but getting back to the true heart of him. And look, no artists have ever done it better than Keith Green, and even Rich Mullins was excellent as well.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you guys have not heard, and I saw Keith Green mentioned in the comments, and it's like, of course, we didn't even talk about him at all, and I mean, he deserves his own show.
Shame on us. Yeah, exactly. We haven't talked about a lot. Like, we actually didn't talk a lot about the 80s. We didn't really go into like the 70s much. A little bit with rock, right? Like Stryper and like Petra and like stuff like that, but we really didn't talk about. There's so many, especially you could have a whole show just on the origins, like in the beginning of Christian music. You know what I mean? There's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen the Keith Green documentaries, I mean, as a boy, I went to the Melody Green, memorial shows that they would do where she would talk and then they would play a whole Keith Green unreleased concert. I remember seeing that as like a 5 or 6 year old boy, and that was super impactful. And man, just quickly on Keith Green, I mean, his life, he was already so big as an artist, doing free concerts. Just he had a heart to serve. That was it, and he wanted to reach the world. He had this hunger that he was supposed to reach the world, and he thought he needed to do a secular album that crossed over to reach the world. And he had formed the whole band, and he went in to go produce it, and you can go watch it in his documentary. And but God told him, no, you're going to do another worship album. He's like, but I don't want to just keep reaching the church. I want to reach the world. And that album was the last album that he ever made. But that album, the whole premise of it was to go out and, spawn the missions field. And through his death, that album was able to reach so many, and people are still in the missions field because they heard the calling through those memorial shows that they put on after his death. Yeah. And it spun thousands and thousands of missionaries to go reach thousands of people. Yeah. I mean that, here, like, if you're an artist and you're trying to get into this, like, that should be your focal point. That should be like, I'm here to serve. I'm here to do this. And so, obviously, go back to good songwriting, of course, and then obviously, do it because you are doing it for the right reasons.
Amen. Well, with that, we're going to call it a wrap. It's been Celebrate Truth Radio, episode 58 with Johnny Rocket and Chris Bailey. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Make sure that you subscribe, you like, and do all that good stuff. Share with your friends. We'll be back with Pastor Nate Wolfe next week with more special guests, so don't miss that. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Blessings to y'all.